Hey guys, how you doing? These times they are uncertain, of that there is no doubt, and nobody can tell me quite what it's all about. The heartbreak and the loneliness, the chaos and the fear will make even the strongest cry. I wish my ma was here. A young man on a battlefield fights for a rich man's gold. The bullet cracks into his spine, he knows he won't grow old. And as the tears come streaming down, at once his mind goes clear. The war was fought for nothing, he cries, I wish my ma was here. A lively story well in hand, a joke to soothe your soul. And when it came to arguing, she'd forgive and let it go. And when I cried, she held me, told me it's okay, my dear. And as we face these darkened days, I wish my ma was here. And as we march into the streets, as all the righteous do, we'll raise our voices to the skies. They cannot stop the truth. And as we tear their structures down, we'll raise a victory cheer. We made the world a better place, and I wish my ma was here. Yeah, we made the world a better place, and I wish my ma was here. Eric, I'm so sorry to hear this, bud. You lost your job because of COVID. Oh my goodness. I hope that they've given you. I hope they've given you some kind of reprieve or some kind of. I hope you've got a fallback. Is basically it. Like if it's for COVID, like there should be some kind of support, right? I hope you're doing okay, bud. I hope you're doing okay. Oh my God. Hey everybody, Famita, good to see you. Major, Nova Scotia, good to see you guys. I can handle it. I can return to it if I get a doctor's note saying you can work full time. Good to see you too, Alex. Okay, so it's not like a total disaster for you, bud. Just a little bump in the road. Little bump in the road. Oh my goodness. We're all trying to get through this, eh? We're all trying to get through this ridiculous nonsense that we're all being inflicted with over and over again. Hope you guys are doing well out there in the world. I personally, for myself, I had a nice relaxing day, you know? One of the things that I really have to accept, like, I have in myself this ethos of, like, gotta do more work, gotta do more, like, gotta record stuff, gotta keep doing stuff, but it's not good for my heart, and it's not good for my mind, right? Like, you need downtime. And I'm working more at the capitalist job, and I'm working more at the stream here, right? Doing this kind of stuff. So I decided today was going to be just like a day kind of off, and just sort of chilled out with my little pug, right? Had a nice little walk. Did the usual recording, right? So beautiful day. I hope you guys are having beautiful days too. Honestly, it's a beautiful sunlight out there. Everything. I mean, if life was just like the weather right now, then we'd be doing just dandy, right? It's a beautiful sunny day. Yeah, capitalism has turned content creation into another form of wage slavery. Like it's all like everything's a commodity. Like that's what it is. Like everything's a commodity, right? Like and you can see that right? You can see how everything is being commodified in very serious ways, right? That, like, in a way, like, this is just, like, I'm creating a channel where we're all kind of gathering together. And so it's like, and you can see this with, like, YouTube streamers, like Twitch streamers, I think, are the greatest example. They've commodified friendship, right? That friendship itself has been somewhat commodified, and that everyone's so exhausted and uncertain and isolated and dislocated, so they seek out friendship through these kind of Twitch streamers and all this kind of stuff. I myself am guilty of this, and this channel, I'm sure, has a deal of that. So, like, friendship itself gets commodified. And, I mean, we see that, like, OnlyFans. Like, sexual relationships are getting commodified more and more. Like, you expect a certain amount of prostitution in your society. You expect a certain amount of that kind of thing in your society, for sure. But, like, the OnlyFans stuff has, like, really ramped it up. And, like, so, like, sexual relationships and, like, romantic relationships are becoming more and more about economics. And, like, you can go back and watch a lot of Charlie Chaplin stuff. Like, during the Great Depression, Charlie Chaplin has this really brilliant movie that is essentially a commentary of this, where it's I think the name of the film was City Lights. It was one of his big movies. And the entire plot of the movie is that Charlie Chaplin is, the tramp, the homeless man, right? The lovable poor man who we all love the minute we see him. And he runs into a middle class. Hey, Barnabas, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. You see a middle class woman who is blind, and he encounters her, and through interacting with her, he falls dearly in love with her. And then, as they interact more and more, she becomes quite fond of him. And then he finds a way to cure her blindness, but he needs money. And so he sets out on this enormous path to sacrifice himself. And of course it turns into, like, it's a comedy, right? So it's Charlie Chaplin, so he goes into a boxing match, and there's all of this kind of stuff. But he walks away the victor, and she gets the surgery she needs, and she stops becoming blind. And the end of the movie is this young lady, now having regained her sight. Charlie Chaplin's character is struggling to introduce himself to her, and he eventually does. She realizes that this homeless man is the person she's been interacting with, and the final shots of the piece are her looking at him in this kind of pitiable way, with an understanding that the two of them could never move forward in a relationship because they are of a different economic class, that they are in a different economic strata from one another. And that's kind of the heartbreaking truth that Chaplin wanted to put forward with this film, City Lights, that capitalism creates class stratas, and there is no permeability between those classes. So if you are working in retail, the only pool of people that you will have access to are other retailers or people in that class strata. And if you're the doctor, lawyer, engineer, then you're in that strata. And if you're in, and of course, if you're like a millionaire, right, then it's other millionaires. And there's not any permeability between those things. So capitalism is, in very serious ways, maligning fairly straightforward relationships. Like, we can't actually talk to one another on a one-to-one basis as equals, that we have to be kind of in these strata with one another. Like, I'm not going to get invited to the lawyer party, right? I'm not going to get invited, and conversely, like, the lawyers aren't going to go to the servants party, right? And that's more and more what it's becoming. I got you. Wow. And then, of course, there's Milo. And Milo, of course, breaks all class dynamics, don't you, buddy? Pugs are lucky that way. Tell me you are aware of class without being aware of class with confessions of crushes you dismissed out of hand for $200. And Eric, which article, dude? I totally forget. I think I think I've got it here. Okay. We're gonna go through this stuff. So climate change, 50-50 chance of breaching 1.5 warming limit. This is by Matt McGrath, BBC News. Right? You know things are getting serious when BBC News is starting to publish some serious articles, right? The likelihood of crossing a key global warming threshold has risen significantly, according to a new analysis. UK Met Office researchers say that there's now around a 50-50 chance that the world will warm by more than 1.5 Celsius over the next 5 years. Such a rise would be temporary, but researchers are concerned about the overall direction of temperatures. It's almost certain that 2022 to 2026 will see a record warmest year, they said. The Met Office is the UK's national meteorological service. As levels of warming gases in the atmosphere have accrued rapidly over the past 3 decades, global temperatures have responded by rising in step. In 2015, the world's average temperature first went 1 Celsius above pre-industrial levels, which are generally thought of as the temperatures recorded in the middle of the 19th century. That was also the year the political leaders signed the Paris Climate Agreement, which committed the world to keeping the rise in global temperatures well below 2 Celsius, while pursuing efforts to keep them under 1.5 Celsius. At COP26 in Glasgow last November, governments reiterated their commitment to keeping 1.5 Celsius alive. For the past 7 years, global temperatures have stayed at or around that 1 Celsius mark, with 2016 and 2020 essentially tied as the warmest years on record. Scientists say that with around 1 Celsius of warming, the world is already experiencing significant impacts, such as the unprecedented wildfires seen in North America last year, or the drastic heat waves currently hitting India and Pakistan. This update from the World Meteorological Association, carried out by the UK Met Office, says that the chances of temporarily going over 1.5 Celsius in one of the next 5 years have never been higher. The study suggests that temperatures between 2022 and 2026 will be between 1.1 Celsius and 1.7 Celsius, higher than pre-industrial levels. The Met Office researchers predicted that for any 1 year in the period, the likelihood of breaching the 1.5 Celsius level is around 48%, or close to 50-50. The basic thing that's changing is that the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere are slowly creeping up, said Dr. Leon Hermanson from the Met Office, the lead author of the report. I think people are already quite concerned about climate change, and it is worrying. It is showing that we continue to warm the planet, and we're getting closer to this first threshold that was set in the Paris Agreement. And we need to continue doing everything we can to cut the use of fossil fuels. The researchers say that going over 1.5 Celsius for 1 year isn't the same as a sustained rise where temperatures don't fall below this figure. The likelihood is that if it is exceeded in the next 5 years, it will fall below 1.5 Celsius again. However, there is now little room for complacency. For as long as we continue to emit greenhouse gases, temperatures will continue to rise, says Prof. Paternitalis from the WMO. And alongside that, our oceans will continue to become warmer and more acidic, sea ice and glaciers will continue to melt, sea level will continue to rise, and our weather will become more extreme, he said. According to the study, the Arctic region will likely feel a greater impact of warming over the next 5 years compared to the rest of the world. The researchers say that the difference in temperatures from the long-term average will be 3 times as large in these areas. The researchers also believe that one of the coming years will likely break the 2016 and 2020 record for warmest year. That will happen most likely in an El Niño year. That's a natural meteorological phenomenon associated with an unusual warming of the surface waters of the eastern Pacific Ocean that can impact weather all over the world. The year we do exceed 1.5 degrees temporarily will probably be an El Nino year, said Dr. Hermanson of the Met Office. It's on top of climate change, kind of like the Wiggles on top of the trend, if you like. And the next record year will probably be an El Nino year, like 2016 was. Wonka wonk 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 wonk. Right? Get ready for it. We're going for a ride. We're going for a ride. Big takeaway for me on this article is they point out that Arctic areas, right? Areas closer to the north and the Arctic are going to experience 3 times the warming, right? 3 times the warming. Content, you dated a millionaire? How'd you not land that, right? Or were they slumming, right? Right? Bumble is saying the global warming scenario that is particularly chilling to me is the idea that the acidification of the oceans will stop the oxygen cycle, and we will suffocate before we die, or starve or die of thirst. I mean, I don't know. Like, if there's like a big like flip, and then like all of the oxygen, like if the atmosphere basically just dissipates and all the oxygen just goes away and we all just choke and die, right? Like it's like, okay, you know, yeah, wet bulb also, you know, like it's, I feel like that's what makes it the scariest, is that there's no, like, we don't really know what's going to happen, right? We don't really know what's going to happen. And we're really not doing anything to really stop it, especially here in Canada. Some of the European nations are actually doing something, but when you actually look at what they're doing, they're basically just offshoring their pollution, right? So they can say, oh, look, we made our pollution less, but really all they've done is they've sent it over to Chad or Nigeria or something, so that it's the Nigerians that are responsible for the pollution now, while the Europeans get it. We've got to get through depression, right? Like, I feel like there is within, I especially notice it within the millennials, there is this sense of nihilism that exists, and this sense of nihilism, right? I find it to be quite odd, because we're like literally sitting here being like, well, we haven't tried anything and we're out of ideas. That's essentially what the millennials are saying, right? We haven't really done anything. Like, for God's sakes, walk into a toy store. What are you going to see? Right? You're going to see reams and reams and reams and reams of plastic. Right? We're not even trying. Like, we're not even trying. There's so many serious things that we could actually do. There's so many serious things that we could actually pursue. And we're simply refusing to at this point. And that's the way we've got to actually start talking about it. It's a refusal, right? It's not that we can't do it. It's that we're just refusing to do it. And why are we refusing to do it? Because we're basically kids. Like, you think about the sacrifices that our grandparents went through. Like, we're talking about people who literally left their families, left their jobs, left everything they had, and went and fought in a world war overseas, got blown up by Nazis and shit, right? Very serious. And you're telling me that we can't just put down our toys? No. Like, no. Get completely fucked with all of this. Like, get completely fucked with all of this. We need to be transitioning into a war economy. We need to say to the children who have led us into this problem that it's time for the adults to make adult decisions, right? Time to put the toys in the toy chest. And this is, in my view, this is the most embarrassing part about the conversation. We're not asking people to go to war. We're not asking people to, like, go overseas and pick up a gun and shoot at somebody and be shot at. We're not asking for people to do any of that. We're literally telling them to put the toys in the toy chest. That's literally where we're at. Like, straightforwardly. The toys need to go into the toy chest. Right? Can't be done. Can't be done. right? And you listen to the liberals talk about this, right? Yeah, clean water, breathable air, all that kind of stuff. But guys, the economy, the people responsible for creating this crisis in the first place, who won't think of these thieves that should be arrested and incarcerated for the rest of their natural lives, right? Like, the Liberal Party exists to protect the people who are creating this problem. That's what they're doing. And all of what we are looking at is a series of concessions. That's what we're looking at. Like that, I guess we'll invest in electric cars. I guess we'll invest in these sorts of things. As long as it's profitable for the people creating the problem in the first place. Right? As long as everybody can do it. Lawnmower Man, good to see you. So, like, as always, right? Start organizing with your local communists. Start organizing with your local socialists. We've got to get moving. We've got to get moving, and we've got to get moving locally, right? It's great that you guys come on here. I'm so grateful that you're here, really and truthfully. Like, this is a good place for us to come and stand with one another in solidarity, but the reality is that we're too spread out. We're too spread out, right? Even the people who are close to me, right, are in places like Scarborough, right, are in places like Mississauga, right? It's time to begin organizing locally, more seriously, more locally, because that is actually how the change is going to come. It's going because the global system of capital is actually collapsing, right? It's collapsing in serious ways. And all of these positions that people have been like, well, the local thing is a bit more expensive, and I'm like, well, soon the local stuff is not going to be more expensive. Right? Soon it's going to actually be... I'm seeing this in the place that I work at, the cafe that I work at. One of the reasons why I work there, and I'm happy to work there, is because they're actually quite conscious of all of this kind of stuff. They source everything locally. They work with the community locally. They're trying really hard to lower the impact of their climate change footprint. And I'm beginning to see... and our stuff has always been a bit more expensive, right? Well, it's starting to level off. And it's starting to level off because now to get, fruit and veg from Guatemala or whatever means that you got to pay for these extraordinary fuel prices. Right? So we got to start organizing. John, local stuff isn't cheaper. No, the local stuff is always more expensive. And there's reasons for that. It's because what you end up with is you end up with smaller producers who need to have a higher profit margin or a higher price margin in order to make it profitable for them. And they're competing with global conglomerates. And global conglomerates can produce 100 billion of something, right? Because they're using this heavily subsidized, industrialized global model, right? So you can't compete at the price point. And so you end up with the hipster, the hipster niche stuff, right? And that's the way it's always been pitched. But it's going to level off. It's going to level off. And this is in my view, this is a big reason why the transition hasn't taken place yet, is because a lot of the technologies are decentralizing, right? You think about solar, right? I can have a solar panel right here. This window I have here is called, I call this the window of power. It bakes this place. If I don't close this window every single day, the temperature in this space goes up 5 degrees. It's just boom, huge, right? I could put a solar panel in this window and easily power this computer setup if I had a battery, right? 3D printing. Yeah, Famita, we've talked about this. I know how much you love 3D printing, right? So, but it means the capitalists can't meter it, right? That's the reason why we're not doing it. Because the capitalists can't insert themselves worthlessly in the process, right? That they have to go and actually do something worthwhile, and they're not capable of that because they've never done it. So, organize locally, find your local people, get involved in it, get serious with it. Tell them I exist. I'll tell other people they exist. Spread it around as we learn more and more. Now the Communist Party is a conveniently ethical dating pool. Good job. Hey, there you go. Bumble thinking about the things that are correct. Alex just applied to join the Communist Party of Canada. Glad to hear it, bud. We got to start putting tendrils out. We got to start connecting, right? And you're right. You say later on here, unfortunately, there's a lot of animosity between different groups of socialists and communists. Like, we got to get over it. That's just the long and short of it. Like, we got to get over it. Like, we have a common enemy. We have a common enemy, and we have a common cause. And the idea that we're not going to put aside, like, the Trotsky-Stalin conversation or whatever, so that we can bicker with one another while neoliberal capital literally destroys the world. Like, you got to be kidding me. Like, you got to absolutely be kidding me. Like, have your, theoretical conversations about your, your hero or whatever, if you want. But the idea that you're going to, like, throw your hands up and be like, I refuse to organize with people, it's astounding to me. Like, it's completely astounding to me. You talk about short-sightedness, right? I'm in a very happy throuple now. I'm glad to hear that, bud. That's exciting. I was in a throuple once. That was really nice, actually. It was nice. There were definitely things I enjoyed. Weird question. What if we had global conglomerate people's monopolies? I mean, well, this is something I've been talking to lots of people about. Like, part of the issue with land reform, right, is that it always results in a fight, right? It's always very difficult to do because the people who own the land and work the land, they don't want the reform, so you end up with a struggle. I mean, just ask Stalin in the Soviet Union, right? You always end up with these big struggles. But right now, the way that farming works in North America, it would be the easiest thing to nationalize in the world, right? There's almost no labor involved. It's as automated as it's ever been, right? Like, literally, like, one dude with a combine can work like 100 acres of land, right? Like, so for a government force to come in and take over, it would be very easy to do right now. Like, now would be the time to do land reform in this society, right? And, like, if this is the thing, like, if the monopolies were owned by the people and the goal was to keep prices as low as possible in all cases, like, the issue with monopolies is that they're privately owned and privately held. And so if I privately own a monopoly, I can make the price what I want. Especially if you have to have it, right? Like, if I own the water supply, I can charge what I want for it, and you got to pay because I have the monopoly. It's very straightforward shit. I believe that anarchists and communists also need to get over their differences as well. Absolutely. No, I absolutely think this is the case. Like, just today, I just had, like, a Thought Slime video on. I don't know if you guys know Thought Slime. And more I've become a bit disenfranchised with him because I think he's fallen for the comfortable leftist trap, which is that he's like, he's on YouTube, he's got 200,000 followers, so he's making his money just doing kind of goofy videos now. And he starts talking about the communist movements that are like Caleb Maupin and Jackson Hinkle and these guys. And it's just like a stone throwing thing. And I'm just like, why? Like, why? What did we gain here? What happened? And I didn't, like, it wasn't even a serious critique. It was just kind of like jokey jokes, right? So I just worry that capitalism itself is going to, like think someone like myself, right? So here's a process that could occur, right, through capitalism. So one of the things that I do is I go out and I protest. I go to protest and I'm trying to build protest movements. Right? Trying to get involved in protest movements, trying to get involved in political parties and all that. Well, if this channel starts paying enough so that my food and shelter is taken care of, right? Well, will I be incentivized to continue doing those things? Right? Like, will I be incentivized to create political organization? Will I be incentivized to do that? Or will I just become focused on pleasing an audience? Right? Which is what I think has happened to a lot of these guys, is that they really are just there to please an audience. You know, they're not actually there to build political power and build political movements. They're there to just create content for a disgruntled population, right? And it's something I try to be aware of so that I don't fall for the trap, because it is a trap. Like, it's a total trap. That, like, it's like the one ring of power, right? Like you get the one ring, it corrupts you. I think that communist, socialist, anarchists start infighting when they stop fighting against specific enemies of the people. Idle hands, as they say. Yeah, there is that. Well, and there are, like, differences on how we should pursue things, right? And there are, like, there are notable, like, but we should have those conversations. And we should be able to come to an understanding that, like, I feel like the way the Chinese do it in their society, right, is they have a vote, and once the vote is held, then it's just understood that that's the way we're going to move forward, right? So, and if everybody agrees to this, and if everybody moves forward in that way, it means that it hopefully prevents people from blowing up on each other, right? Because that's always what happens. Like, you think about, like, Trotsky and Stalin, right? So a vote was held, Stalin won, and Trotsky blew off of him, right? Hold on, guys. Sorry. My pug's caught in his reverse sneezing thing. So we gotta do everything we can to stop this from happening. Okay, buddy. Okay, come here. Let's put on a show. Let's put on a show for the people. Come here. Give the people what they want. And you know what people want? Milo, what's this? What's this? What's this? What's this? Oh, buddy, you're not coming here. Milo, stay. Stay. Okay, buddy? Okay, buddy? Okay, good boy. Sorry, guys. Oh, shoot. Okay, buddy, nuclear option time. Nuclear option. We gotta do it. Oh my god. Sorry, guys. My pug is in distress. Milo, for real. Pugs. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. If I leave him like that, he can actually hurt himself. So, I gotta do something about it when it happens. Yeah, there it is still. You okay, buddy? You better? No more snorts? Good boy. Good boy. Okay. Yeah, in regards to Thought Slime, yeah, I mean, he used to make a lot of good videos, and and it was a lot of very good leftist content, and then very steadily he kind of became more interested in sort of broad things, which I thought was fine, like as long as it was kind of rooted in a leftist sort of thing. But now, like, he's not engaging with it seriously. I think that's the thing that I'm really struggling with. Like, it's fine if you want to disagree with Moppin, and especially someone like Hans Infrared, right? Exactly. No, you're right, Content. Like, I'm not trying to defend the patriotic socialists. Like, I'm not trying to. But I feel like if you're going to engage the material, you should do so seriously, right? Like, you should actually try to be thoughtful and try to actually articulate what it is they're saying, what it is what the issues that are brought forward with it, right? But that's not really what is happening anymore. And more I'm seeing, like, people who, like, I thought were serious leftists kind of fall into this, like, jokey, like, and I think it's part of this nihilism. There's just this a sense of, like, I'm just going to watch the freak show, right? I'm just going to watch the freak show, and I'm just going to throw the stones. I'm not actually interested in creating a larger understanding. I'm not actually interested in creating a collaboration. I'm not actually interested in finding out what these guys are saying and then reaching out to be able to connect and organize in a way. Like, you're never going to agree with everybody. Like, it's just never going to happen. And there's going to be groups who you are going to look at and say, I don't really agree with most of the things you say, but we do agree on the idea that the working class is under attack, right? And if you agree with one another that the working class is under attack, then you're already on the right side of it, and you can organize together. But if all you're going to do is throw stones at the other side because they have a position over here that you don't like, well, that's moral purity. You're just never going to get anywhere, right? You're never actually going to get anywhere. But TS, I don't know what that means. Sorry, bud. But TS, like, the, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I've tuned in to, like, if I wanted to do, like, a straight critique of someone like Has, Infrared, I just think he's in, like, I don't know what he's talking about because I don't think he knows what he's talking about. There's a lot of word salading that happens when I tune in with that guy. Oh, but Thought Slime, yeah. And like most of the critiques that come towards Jackson Hinkle, right, is that he's just a young man. Like, that's kind of it. Like, he doesn't, like, these guys don't know everything, and they're never going to know everything, right? And they're just trying to find a way to articulate themselves in a way that makes sense to themselves. Like, like the patriotic socialist movement generally, right? If I wanted to be the nicest that I could possibly be, right? I am looking at a bunch of guys who love their country, who and are upset that something wrong is going with it, and are trying to square the circle between the history of their own country and the communist ideas that they want to move forward with, right? Like, that's really fundamentally what I'm looking at when I see these guys. Does that create contradictions? Of course it does. Of course it does, right? You're taking concepts like you're taking a highly capitalistic, individualistic society that has a long history of genocide and slavery, and attempting to make that cohesive somehow with Marxist ideas, right? Of course you're going to end up with contradictions. Of course you're going to end up with things that are difficult. Of course you're going to have rough patches and things like this. And the thing to do is not to just reject these people, right? And to just be like, oh, what a bunch of goofs, right? Because of course they're a bunch of goofs. I'm absolutely positive that Engels and Marx, if they existed right now, right, people would be looking at them and being like, what a couple of goofy guys. What a couple of wacky dudes. Like, look at Marx's big-ass beard, and Engels had, like, the big crazy, like, mustache and all that. We'd 100% be looking at these guys and being like, man, what a bunch of goofy ideas, right? But if you don't actually engage meaningfully in those ideas and attempt to communicate, like, what they are and attempt to engage in them in serious ways, then they'll never actually change their position, right? Or they'll never actually find a way to articulate their ideas maybe a bit cleaner, right? If you're a right-wing, egoist, anarchist, patriotism becomes nonsensical. I mean, like, honestly, I'm at the point where I'm happy to say if you're on the right wing, you're already a bit nonsensical, right? Like, it's hard to square the circle these days, right? It's hard to square the circle these days to be a right-winger. And people are trying. God bless them. Speaking of right-wing, though, right? Conservative Party of Canada is sitting at 142. Liberal. If an election was held today, the Conservative Party would walk away with the election with 142. The Liberal would have 141. The NDP 27. Bloc 26. Green 2. PPC 0. Although the PPC is creeping up to that special 5 is an important number for the PPC. This is a big upswing for the Conservative Party, right? The Conservative Party is sitting there, like, right on the threshold of taking power here in Canada. They're right on the threshold. Like, we're talking about 30 seats. Really. Like, if 30 ridings here in Canada decide to swing Conservative, and you're looking at a ton of these ridings are being won by single-digit percentages, right? So if a couple of these ridings decide to push over to Conservative, right? You could see a conservative majority materialize, right? And I suspect that we will see a conservative minority, at least, right, begin to materialize. And, I mean, especially if you actually listen to Pierre Poilievre, right? Like, I've been running on his stuff on TikTok, and I've been running on his stuff on YouTube. He is beginning to pick up the populist rhetoric that comes out of the PPC, and he's beginning to actually talk about the working class. He's beginning to actually talk about these things. And it's like I'm listening to a communist talk, right? Except what are his ideas? We just need to do more capitalism, right? The working class is being abandoned, and so the way to solve that is by giving more money to corporations, right? Like this is kind of where the trend is happening in our society. And more, as this housing crisis gets worse, right? And the conservatives are really, really pounding on the housing crisis, as they should, right? But their solution is like not a solution either, because we all know what the solution is. Get rid of these speculators. Get rid of these investors. Like, get rid of these guys. Like, why is BlackRock opening up business right now in Canada? Like, it's obviously to just buy up the housing market. Like, it's a straight up game of Monopoly, and we're just not doing anything to stop it. I fear the U.S. may trigger a false flag attack on itself to justify sending boots to Ukraine, because the sanctions have failed and we're 6 months away from elections. That's the only thing that I kind of think about, Isaac, you're hitting on, which is that, like, there's an election coming, right? There's an election coming. And we've seen American and British politicians cynically use war as a way to justify their re-election, right? But the difference here, okay? So, like, when someone like Thatcher does this, like, she's attacking the Balkan Islands, right? The Balkan Islands. The Falkland Islands? Well, am I stupid? I feel like I'm stupid. Anyway, like, right? Like, when... Okay, buddy, I get it. I know, you want love. Like, when George W. Bush does it, right? He's attacking, like, Iraq and Afghanistan. Like, when helpless nations that you can just blow up and nobody's going to care about here in Canada and the United States, right? Like, this situation is different. It's different in enormous ways, right? Like, the United States, the Soviet Union, the Russians have made it very clear what their response to this is going to be, right? They've made it extremely clear in very black and white terms, right? If you start pushing boots into the ground, we will begin dropping like thermo missiles onto strategic targets. Like, we are not going to hold back. Like, they've made it very clear, and we have every reason to believe that that's exactly what they're going to do. Why? Because they've done everything they said they were going to do. That we have no reason to not believe them. So if the position is, let's trigger a false flag attack, and here, so like chemical warfare, right? That's what they did in Syria, right? They created a false narrative with a false flag attack about chemical warfare to justify an invasion into Syria, right? And what with the biological lab narrative that's floating around, right? It'd be a very easy one. The American population is extremely gullible, right? They'll buy into that stupid nonsense. Falkland, thank you, Nova Scotia. And but the major difference is, like, this is a nuclear superpower. Like, this is a nuclear power. Like, they're not, and they're like, the question is, how insane have we gotten? You wanna come up, buddy? You wanna come up? You're just attention seeking so hard right now. Like, how insane are we? How insane have we gone, right? Are we this insane? Because the trajectory in Ukraine right now, if everything stays as it is right now, and what that means very specifically is, like, nobody sends troops in, right? They can send all the military aid they want. That's not relevant, right? Like, Imagine believing that sending, like, we're going to send 100,000 rifles. Okay, how does it get to the army? It doesn't. The Russians have surrounded them. There's no supply chain, right? Like, so when Trudeau announces, I'm going to send material over to the Ukrainians, like, okay, it doesn't matter, right? The only thing that matters now, literally the only thing, is boots on the ground. That's the only thing that'll matter. Well, I shouldn't say only. Like, if the United States starts flying jets over and dropping bombs and shit, like, obviously. But, like, have a good one, Alex. Good to see you, bud. So, if this war is simply allowed to continue, it's going to de-escalate itself. Why? The Russians want it to. Like, that's what it is. What the Russians are doing is they've moved all their troops away from Kiev and away from western Ukraine into Donbass, and they're just claiming Donbass, right? They're clearing out the Ukrainians. They're clearing this all out, and they're already doing it. They're already drawing the line, right? They're not waiting for an agreement. They're just doing it, and so and that's what they want, right? So eventually it's just going to be getting Zelensky to sign a piece of paper that says that is what has happened. But that is what has happened. And, like, if I'm Biden, right, outside of, like, you're going to escalate into nuclear war? Like, are we insane? And the answer might be yes. The answer might be yes. Bumble is saying, my argument is that the distinction between human group and individual need is illusionary, and that the arguments on the left are just phantoms, and it's frustrating to witness. The distinction between human group and individual needs is illusionary. You want to peel that back a little bit? I agree that is illusionary, because trying to make a distinction, you fall under a logical fallacy. It's like saying at what point a pile of sand ceases to be a pile of sand, right? Like, I don't understand how these guys that are talking about individuals and individual rights think that if a community gets rights, that somehow means the individual has less rights, right? Like, one would assume that rights bestowed upon a community would be rights bestowed upon an individual. And the question is, what is or is not a right, right? Who has the right to do what? My little dog is being so distracting right now, guys. I got to be really honest with you. He's like, for real, he's like, pay attention to me and play with me. Let's go. Well, where's your toy, buddy? Where's your toy? Little guy, just losing his mind. It's fascinating watching the country swing to the right. And, like, this is something... Oh, I've actually got something here I wanted to read. Yeah, this is it right here. This is very sobering. I found this to be very, very sobering. And very, like, yeah, she's nailing it, right? She's getting it right. Just a reminder, this is from Bryn Tanhill, right? She's on Twitter for now. We'll see how that goes. Just a reminder, because of non-proportional representation and demographics, in order to break the filibuster and overcome the R+6 to 7 bias in the Senate, Democrats would need to win 3 straight elections by 19 points to make abortion legal nationally. They need to win the national vote several times in a row by 5+ points to have a shot at breaking even. Most forecasters look at the 2024 landscape and don't think there's much of a chance for Democrats to hold the Senate past the 2024 election. Mitch McConnell has promised that if Republicans regain control of the Senate in 2022, that he will not let Biden put any more Supreme Court justices on the bench. He would keep seats open for up to 6 years if he had to. Starting in January 2023, there is probably no meaningful hope of changing the composition of the court. It is estimated that the U.S.'s already sky-high maternal mortality rate will rise by 21% as a result of Dobbs v. Jackson. Most states are so gerrymandered that changing the composition of the state legislature is effectively impossible. The GOP has been able to maintain supermajorities in the WI legislature despite losing elections by up to 10 points. Because SCOTUS has approved political gerrymanders v. Gill, G3, in most states that ban abortion, there is no realistic hope of reversing these bans by voting out the incumbents who put the bans in place. Only 8% of U.S. House seats are competitive due to gerrymandering. A few states allow voter-initiated ballot initiatives or state constitutional amendments. However, SCOTUS has allowed state legislatures to effectively overturn them. For example, Floridians voted to restore the voting rights of felons overwhelmingly. The gerrymandered state legislature turned around and passed a law requiring felons to prove they have paid all court fees before rights can be restored. Problem is, records in Florida are so sloppy that it is effectively impossible to do so. This requirement was as fair as a 1950s literacy test to vote, and thus the ballot initiative was thwarted by politicians who cannot be voted out of office, aided and abetted by a SCOTUS put in place by presidents who lost its popular vote. There are very good options for bringing back abortion rights after Dobbs v. Jackson. The U.S. political and legal system is so broken that it is completely immune to the will of the people. A lot of legal-minded folks can see the writing on the wall. The loss of an implied right to privacy under the Fourth Amendment and institutionalizing the Glucksberg test is likely the end of guaranteed access to birth control, same-sex marriage, and the return of sodomy laws throughout the U.S. South, at least 12 states. At the same time, LGBT people are being labeled pedophiles and groomers. Our trans children are being taken away by the state, and our existence's obscenity. It's not hard to see a future where Texas, it is banned SSM again and is yanking kids from loving LGBTQ homes. We can already see that the GOP wants to ban abortion through the U.S. in 2025 by ending the filibuster and passing a national law. GOP legislators are talking about women being prevented from leaving states to get abortions elsewhere. Other states are passing fetal personhood amendments that would potentially allow states like Texas to reach into blue states where abortion remains legal, for example, New Mexico, to prosecute doctors in New Mexico who provide abortion to Texans, possibly under the felony murder rule. This sets the U.S. up for the nightmare scenario of red states demanding extradition of women, doctors, and LGBT people who have fled to other states to escape the tyranny of religiously conservative red states that are no longer functioning democracies. Yes, this is basically lining up the court for a Dred Scott II decision. It also sets up the scenario where persecuted people don't stop at a blue state. The end of the line is Canada. So what happens when the Trumpiest U.S. gives Canada the ultimatum? Extradite them or else. I know, buddy, I said Trump. Anyone who studies this is well aware that the U.S. has basically stopped being a functioning democracy, and that it's only going to get worse from here. The right-wing populist GOP is clearly telegraphing where it wants to go. Permanent, minoritarian, Christian nationalist rule. People who don't study this within the analytical framework but understand broadly that losing Roe v. Wade is bad and it feels like we're heading toward the Republic of Gilead are rightly alarmed. They may not be conscious of all these things, but they sense the trend. And they grasp, in a general sense, where this goes, though not the specifics. We're heading towards either a corrupt, authoritarian, dystopian nightmare for women, LGBT people, and non-Christians, or a fracturing of the U.S. that ends the American experiment permanently. Unless these more than one huge black swan events, those are basically the options on the table. Pick one. But somehow, institutionalists want to deny the facts of the situation as I detailed them. They demand everyone behave as if voting and protests in designated zones is their best chance to change things, when anyone with a lick of analytic sense can clearly see that the GOP and SCOTUS don't give a fuck about what the majority of the population want. They're oblivious to the fact that these systems have failed, and that the public can no longer show their displeasure by voting incumbents out of office, put in different judges, pass ballot initiatives. The GOP and SCOTUS know protests have no effect, which bring me to my point. I look at the hand-wringing over the supposed optics of peaceful protesting outside Kavanaugh's home and want to put my head through my desk. This is a mild escalation of things. If they're so worried about the decorum, they should be focused on the reasons why people have felt that protesting in front of the court is effectiveless. It's like complaining about the fire department using axes in your house when it's burning to the ground. Yeah, it's destructive, but way worse than what's happening in the bigger picture. And the big picture for the US is fucking terrifying. The big takeaway for me, guys, and I've said it all along, right? As always, right? Eventually everyone's going to start listening to me and starting to take me seriously. The United States is turning, as Chris Hedges has predicted, right, into a Christian fascist nation, right? That fascism is taking over America. It's taking it over with a Christian iconography, and this means that we need to start reading that Bible. We need to start reading that Bible in a serious way, because that's the language the powerful are going to use. That it's not simply enough anymore for us to go, oh, those kooky Christians. Well, there's no evidence. Well, this isn't literal. None of that matters anymore. None of that matters anymore. Even if you're right, none of that matters anymore. The power structure that is being built in the United States holds in its hand a book that they say is the holy word of God. And if we want to be able to communicate in the language of the people who have power in our society, then that means we need to read the Bible. And we need to become experts in the Bible, because that is the only way they will listen. They will not listen to us if we use reason. They will not care about facts. They will not care about evidence. They will not care about any of those things. The only thing that they might listen to is the Bible. So, start reading. Start reading now. I might actually begin doing taking a section of my show and focusing on Bible verses and focusing on the Bible, because I think it's that important for us. Like, Trump's going to get in again, and then the guy that follows him up is going to be an evangelical fascist, right? And it doesn't look like the Democrats are doing anything serious in order to prevent this in major and serious ways. Like, this is the timeline we are in. This is where we are. And if we have a hope for any of the ideas actually espoused in the Bible, then we need to read it. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Grinning, right? Do you actually think the Christians read the Bible? No. That they clutch onto it so tightly that they don't even open its pages, which is why it's up to us, right? Which is why it is up to us. Because if they're going to tell me that it's this authoritative work of God, right? Well, then I'm going to read it. And I'm going to come to them and be like, hey, your authoritative work of God says this. You want to come up, buddy? Whoa. You asked to come up. You asked to come up. You asked. This guy. They will. It's the only shot we've got with these guys, though. Like, it's the only shot we've got. Right? Right? Like, actually care about the people. Actually care about people who are in poverty. Actually care about any of these things. Like, it's somewhat astounding to me that what has happened in America is that the very people who are clutching a book that say care about the poor, care about the weak, care about the vulnerable, care about these things are the most cruel and vindictive people in the society. Yeah. The only fundamental understanding of the Bible is whatever charismatic, narcissistic psychopaths say it is. But that's because there is a vacuum. That's because there is a vacuum. And that vacuum is being filled by these charismatic, narcissistic psychopaths. Right? That the leftists, right, the secularists, have fundamentally abandoned the Bible. And that has created this vacuum, right, that is being filled by con men, right? And so it's up to us to regain what has been lost. And that is a fundamental understanding of the book, right? Like, we're going back to, like, tribal shit here, guys. Like, we're going back to square one as a people. Like, the decline is going to be swift, it's going to be fast, and it's going to be tribal. Secession is extremely likely. The breaking apart of the American experiment is extremely likely, right? The South will rise again. Like, are we going to see a reinstitution of slavery in the United States? Are we going to see a reclaiming of just feudalism? Are we going to see the rebirth of direct feudalism in these states and in these places? It's very difficult for me to believe that we're not going to see something like that throughout the southern states, right? And Nova Scotia, easier said than done. This is something that we have kind of forgotten, right? Like, everybody has a Bible. Like, everybody's got a Bible, right? Everybody's got a Bible. So rewriting it, easier said than done. And, like, my upbringing is on the Bible, right? My upbringing is on that because it's that's just who I was, right? That's just where I came from. And, like, there's this huge history where there are massive schisms that occur in church history because of the inclusion of a couple of words into a Bible, right? So this idea that we're going to be able to rewrite it, probably not. Probably not. I think the bigger concern for these fascists is going to be people actually reading the thing. I think that's the bigger concern, right? That if you actually read the thing, that's what they don't want you to do, right? But nobody does. Like, nobody does, right? And, like, if you actually read the Bible, right, especially the New Testament, you end up with a story of a man who stood up against a state. Hey, pissed off, how you doing? Fought for the law, fought for the rights of his own people, and was publicly executed for it. That's the story of Christ. Like, sound familiar? Sound like a story that might matter in today's climate, right? Like, and who would the Republicans be? We got an article from Fabita here in the articles section. Yep. This sounds like a Chris Hedges article, but it isn't. Pop Matters: The Rise of Christian Fascism and Its Threat to American Democracy. Dr. G, this is a guest contributor. Okay, buddy. Okay. This was back in 2007. Dr. James Luther Adams, my ethics professor at Harvard Divinity School, told his students that when we were his age, he was close to 80, we would all be fighting the Christian fascists. This is Chris Hedges. For sure, this is Chris Hedges. The warning given 25 years ago came at the moment Pat Robertson and other radio television evangelicalists began speaking about a new political religion that would direct its efforts towards taking control of all institutions, including mainstream denominations and the government. Its stated goal was to use the United States to create a global Christian empire. This call for fundamentalists and evangelicals to take political power was a radical and ominous mutation of traditional Christianity. It was hard at the time to take such fantastic rhetoric seriously, especially given the buffoonish quality of those who expounded it. But Adams warned us against the blindness caused by intellectual snobbery. The Nazis, he said, were not going to return with swastikas and brown shirts. Their ideological inheritors had found a mask for fascism in the pages of the Bible. He was not a man to use the word fascist lightly. He had been in Germany in 1935 and in 1936 and worked with the underground anti-Nazi church known as the Confessing Church, led by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Adams was eventually detained and interrogated by the Gestapo, who suggested he might want to consider returning to the United States. It was a suggestion he followed. He left on a night train with framed portraits of Adolf Hitler, placed over the contents of his suitcase to hide the rolls of home movie film he had taken of the so-called German Christian Church, which was pro-Nazi, and the few individuals who defied the Nazis, including the theologians Karl Barth and Albert Schweitzer. The ruse worked when the border police lifted the tops of the suitcase, saw the portraits of the Fuhrer, and closed them up again. I watched hours of the grainy black and white films as he narrated in his apartment in Cambridge. Adams understood that totalitarian movements are built out of deep personal and economic despair. He warned that the flight of manufacturing jobs, the impoverishment of the American working class, the physical obliteration of communities in the vast, soulless exurbs and decaying Rust Belt were swiftly deforming our society. The current assault on the middle class, which now lives in a world in which anything that can be put on software can be outsourced, would have terrified him. The stories that many in this movement told me over the past 2 years as I worked on American fascists, the Christian right, and the war on America were stories of this failure. Personal, communal, and often economic. This despair, Adams said, would empower dangerous dreamers, those who today bombard the airwaves with an idealistic and religious utopianism that promises, through violent, apocalyptic purification, to eradicate the old, sinful world that has failed many Americans. These Christian utopians promise to replace this internal and external emptiness with a mythical world where time stops and all problems are solved. The mounting despair rippling across the United States, one I witnessed repeatedly as I traveled the country, remains unaddressed by the Democratic Party, which has abandoned the working class, like its Republican counterpart, for massive corporate funding. The Christian right has lured tens of millions of Americans who rightly feel abandoned and betrayed by the political system from the reality-based world to one of magic, to fantastic visions of angels and miracles, to a childlike belief that God has a plan for them and Jesus will guide and protect them. This mythological worldview, one that has no use for science or dispassionate, honest intellectual inquiry, one that promises that the loss of jobs and health insurance does not matter as long as you are right with Jesus, offers a lying world of consistency that addresses the emotional yearnings of desperate followers at the expense of reality. It creates a world where facts become interchangeable with opinions, where lies become true, the very essence of the totalitarian state. It includes a dark license to kill, to obliterate all those who do not conform to this vision, from Muslims in the Middle East to those at home who refuse to submit to the movement, and it conveniently empowers a rapacious oligarchy whose god is maximum profit at the expense of citizens. We now live in a nation where the top 1% control more wealth than the bottom 90% combined, where we have legalized torture and can lock up citizens without trial. Arthur Schlesinger, in the Cycles of American History, wrote that the great religious ages were notable for their indifference to human rights in the contemporary sense, not only for their acquiescence in poverty, inequality, and oppression, but for their enthusiastic justification of slavery, persecution, torture, and genocide. Adams saw in the Christian right, long before we did, disturbing similarities with the German Christian Church and the Nazi Party. Similarities that he said would, in the event of prolonged social instability or a national crisis, see American fascists rise under the guise of religion to dismantle the open society. He despaired of U.S. liberals who, he said, as in Nazi Germany, mouthed silly platitudes about dialogue and inclusiveness that made them ineffectual and impotent. Liberals, he said, did not understand the power and allure of evil, or the cold reality of how the world worked. The current hand-wringing by Democrats, with many asking how they can reach out to a movement whose leaders brand them demonic and satanic, would not have surprised Adams. Like Bonhoeffer, he did not believe that those who would fight effectively in coming times of turmoil, a fight that for him was an integral part of the biblical message, would come from the church or the liberal secular elite. His critique of the prominent research universities, along with the media, was no less withering. These institutions, self-absorbed, compromised by their close relationship with government and corporations, given enough of the pie to be complacent, were unwilling to deal with the fundamental moral questions and inequities of the age. They had no stomach for a battle that might cost them their prestige and comfort. He told me, I suspect half in jest, that if the Nazis took over America, 60% of the Harvard faculty would begin their lectures with the Nazi salute. But this, too, was not an abstraction. He had watched academics at the University of Heidelberg, including the philosopher Martin Heidegger, raise their arms stiffly to students before class. 2 decades later, even in the face of the growing reach of the Christian right, his prediction seems apocalyptic. And yet, the power brokers in the Christian right have moved from the fringes of society to the floor of the House of Representatives and the Senate. 45 senators and 186 members of the House before last elections earned approval ratings of 80 to 100% from the 3 most influential Christian right advocacy groups: the Christian Coalition, Eagle Forum, and Family Resource Council. President Bush has handed hundreds of millions of dollars in federal aid to these groups and dismantled federal programs in science, reproductive rights, and AIDS research to pay homage to the pseudoscience and quackery of the Christian right. Bush will, I suspect, turn out to be no more than a weak transition figure, our version of Otto von Bismarck, who also used values to energize his base at the end of the 19th century and launched Kultur Kampf, the word from which we get culture wars, against Catholics and Jews. Bismarck's attacks, which split Germany and made the discrediting of whole segments of the society an acceptable part of the civil discourse, paved the way for the Nazis' more virulent racism and repression. The radical Christian right, calling for a Christian state where whole segments of American society, from gays and lesbians to liberals to immigrants to artists to intellectuals, will have no legitimacy and be reduced, at best, to second-class citizen. Await a crisis, an economic meltdown, another catastrophic terrorist strike, or a series of environmental disasters. A period of instability will permit them to push through their radical agenda, one that will be sold to a frightened American public as a return to security and law and order, as well as moral purity and prosperity. This movement, the most dangerous mass movement in American history, will not be blunted until the growing social and economic inequities that blight this nation are addressed, until tens of millions of Americans, now locked in hermetic systems of indoctrination through Christian television and radio, as well as Christian schools, are reincorporated into American society and given a future, one with hope, adequate wages, job security, and generous federal and state assistance. The unchecked rape of America, which continues with the blessing of both political parties, heralds not only the empowerment of this American oligarchy, but the eventual death of the democratic state and birth of American fascism. This was written in 2007, and we can see the march continue. That Donald Trump is himself just another transitionary figure. That there is coming a very clear-throated fascist who is not going to pretend to be anything other than that. That's the thing that I am waiting for and that I am expecting. That Donald Trump is just a boob. He's just going to say what he needs to say to be the president. But there is going to be someone come out of the Republican Party who is going to explicitly state, mask off, not pretending otherwise, that America is a Christian nation to be ruled by Christians exclusively. Demand Better, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. The Bible is not authoritative to Christians. I've never changed someone's mind by quoting scriptures. I have a Bible in my desk drawer from 1948 that shows a map of Palestine. Very nice. I posted in general a book that I highly recommend that you get if you want to start reading from the Bible. It's a dictionary showing quotes from the early Christian belief, talking about people who lived in the first few centuries. I even took a picture of the topic of wealth and posted in Discourse as an example of how the dictionary works. Is that in the general? General. Click. A dictionary of early Christian beliefs. Like, we're really going back to square one, guys. Like, really. Most Christians might hear a great argument from the Bible, but they withhold judgment until they get a response from their pastor or group leader. They don't think for themselves. Yes, that's the truth. Right? They want to be on the in-group. Right? It's that in-group thinking. You might think that's a cultural issue, but when Christians go against their religious leaders, they are cut out of the economy created by the church, yeah? When I left the church, I gave up a $750K a year job. I also lost the support I had built for myself over 14 years of ministry. Most Christians won't take that kind of hit. Yeah, that at the end of the day, it's not the ideology that matters, right? It's the economics, right? Which, as Marxists, that's what we're focusing on most, right? We have a materialist viewpoint. We talk about things in material ways. We analyze things historically. My neighbors growing up were Mormons, and daughters played outside with us, and dad offed himself. Woo. The church excommunicated them. They lost their house. I never saw them again. Brutal. Brutal. Community membership is a material issue. The church has the congregation by the short hairs, for sure. Right? Chris Hedges is a great source about the Christian right. I highly recommend his book, American Fascism. A material issue by design. Yeah, of course. Right? Like, we're witnessing a rising feudalism in America, right? And if we're not careful, in Canada as well. And it's, like, right now, if conservatives seize power, like, that's it for climate change, man. Like, that's it. These guys are literally running. These guys are literally running. Oh, did I say 750? I meant 75. Yeah. Like, the conservatives are literally running on a platform of ramping up oil production. That's literally the platform they're running on. And they're getting as much support as the Liberal Party. Like, All right. I'm just going to do a rapid fire here, guys. Oh, you know what we should do first? You know what we should do first? Number draw. Number draw. Number draw. I'm going with the 7. Just watch. Mocked isn't in the chat, and so it's going to be a 7.
Here we go for today's number. It's May 10.
Here we go.
2022.
We got a 2 from Pissed Off. We got a 3 from Eric. Oh, enemy in with the 7.
Has a number.
We got an 8
Numbers
from Ligandese.
1 through 10.
4 from Nova Scotia.
Swirl the numbers.
9 from Gooding. Good array, guys. Good array. Feel like we got a good chance. We got a good chance to catch
Pick
something
a
here.
number.
Here we go.
Today's number is 6.
It was 6 yesterday, wasn't it? Did no one pick the 6? No one picked the 6. Hilarious. We missed it yesterday too. No luck today. No luck today. The energy of David Lynch is not with us, right? May it dissipate on those more deserving than us. All right, guys. All right, time for the rapid fire. Here's Warren Gunnels, right? Senate votes 78-17 for a $10 billion bailout to Jeff Bezos. 90-5 for a $125 billion corporate tax break. 87-6 for a $53 billion to corporate outsourcers. 88-11 for $780 billion to war profiteers. And 58-42 against a $15 minimum wage. Welcome to the United States of oligarchy. Yep, the no winners, the pot for tomorrow goes up then. That's right. That's right. Oh, 88. Wouldn't that be quite something? That's an ominous number to pick. The senior pastor made $180K, and I was the next highest paid schlub on the staff. Oof. Yeah, gonna use schlub to describe Christian functionaries from now on. I mean, we got a good article here. Canada's National Observer. Canadians are being eaten up by poverty. Roughly 1 in 10 households nationwide is food insecure. Among those most at risk are renters, persons with disabilities, Indigenous people, and families with young children. Nick Benjamin and his family are among them. The Manitoban lives with his wife and 5 children. Though he makes a good salary, it falls short when they have 7 mouths to feed and his wife is ineligible for disability assistance due to his income. The Benjamin family also feels the strain of inflation. I'm not sure we'll have food at the end of the month because prices go up each time we shop, he says. This year, Canada's inflation reached a 30-year high, with food prices making their biggest jump in more than a decade. Several staples, including beef, chicken, dairy, and milk, are impacted. It's estimated the average Canadian family will spend an extra $966 on food in 2022. It does not help that transportation, gas, and housing costs are also rising, meaning less money for groceries. While food banks can relieve some pressure, they only offer so much. Even after a visit to the local food bank, Benjamin has nothing more than the minimum to feed his family at lunch and dinner. There's no snacking, and it hurts because the kids are growing and need those, he said. Without fresh groceries for another week, the race is often on to see if their supply lasts until the next trip to the store. The worry is overwhelming the Benjamin family. I'm tired of it, he says. The harder I work, the more out of range things get. Oof. It's 6 p.m., dinner time for Vancouver's Brandy Tycolatz. She opens the fridge door and grabs her meal for the night, a small pack of yogurt. Leaving 2 other packs in the fridge, her breakfast, lunch, and dinner over the next few days, she takes a seat. The yogurt has expired and exudes a familiar sour stench. A cup of starchy macaroni completes her meal. After just a few spoonfuls, she's finished, and her empty stomach growls indignantly. I'm starving, she replies with a shrug. This is what life is like for Tycolatz and thousands of low-income Canadians. To see why, just do the math. Imagine you have $2,000 monthly to live on. Rent averages nearly $2,000 a month nationwide. and affordable housing can run over $1,000. Your money is nearly gone from rent alone, and to avoid freezing or living in the dark like a cave dweller, you have other bills to pay too. With what remains, all you can afford to eat are a few items off the grocery store bargain shelf, and even those are drifting out of range as costs rise. With the inflation on everything, it is getting to be too much. Some days I go with nothing at all, says Tycho Latz. Ken Birkin knows all about the struggles faced by Brandy Tycho Latz and the Benjamin family. The 62-year-old from North Vancouver, who operates a small business making balloons, has a monthly shopping budget of $60. With that, he can afford just one meal a day, sometimes a plate of shredded lettuce, other times a bowl of ramen. Instead of looking ahead to outings with family, his life is about surviving day to day, meal to meal, check to check. But those check amounts are staying the same while costs rise. He's feeling the impact. Birkin has endured bone infection, diabetes, and mental health pressures. He struggles to walk, even after losing 125 pounds. He is stressed and frustrated. They have thrown me into the dumpster, he says. Care is the word. Birkin's story sums up what food insecurity does to a person. Canadians living in food-insecure households are vulnerable to chronic conditions like diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, and arthritis. They die earlier than their better-fed counterparts. Food insecurity also contributes to depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation, all of which increase relative to the level of food insecurity experienced. Why is this happening all over Canada? Recent inflation is part of the explanation, but at the root is the ongoing failure to effectively address poverty. While many poverty reduction proposals are made, few of the most notable ones are implemented. Advocates demand major increases to provincial social assistance, the elimination of spousal caps, and more non-market housing, particularly relevant when nearly half of Canadians say housing costs are their biggest obstacle to affording food. Federally, there has been much discussion of a guaranteed basic income, and the Liberal Party of Canada voted in favor of such a policy at its 2021 party convention. The federal government also promoted the introduction of a Canadian disability benefit, an income supplement available to everyone on disability assistance. But little of this has come to fruition, and Birkin, Tycho Latz, and Benjamin are tired of what they consider fluff, the cycle of debates, consultations, studies, reports, and unfulfilled promises, none of which fill stomachs. What they want is action, implemented policies that recognize Canadians need more help as costs soar. Measures at the start of the pandemic, such as federal supplements for families and provincial boosts for persons on social assistance, helped achieve this, and accordingly, food insecurity dropped during fall 2020. It was a game changer for Tycho Latz, who received an extra $300 a month from the BC government. It was wonderful. We really needed it. It also showed that governments could act quickly when they wanted to, but these measures were short-lived while poverty lives on. Canadians like Tycho Latz, Birkins, and Benjamin continue to go hungry, and the gap between the costs of living and the means they have to live on is widening. As Tycho Latz spoons at her empty yogurt pack and reflects on the situation, she notes that one critical element is missing: care. Politicians can start by showing me they care, but right now, they aren't doing that. Maybe they need to live in our shoes until they know what it's like to go hungry. Spencer Van Voleten is a community advocate and nationally published writer from Vancouver. He edits the community news website bcdisability.com and youandmebc.ca, and has been awarded the British Columbia Medal of Good Citizenship and the City of Vancouver Award of Excellence. I mean, something's got to break. Something's got to give, right? Like, hungry people are going to start abandoning these worthless politicians in serious ways, right? Like this is what I talk about when I say that, like, we are not the ones who are actually responsible for changing hearts and minds. That capitalism itself will do that on our behalf. That we very literally need to just be prepared for the influx of people who are going to be disillusioned from this system that is actively abandoning them. Today, at the end of question period, an MP from BC asked for unanimous consent to implement the disability benefit if passed, but the live stream ended. I put it in the Discord. Yeah, of course the live stream ended. These people are shameless. Like, they're shameless. Right? They know that what they're doing is disgraceful. They know that what they're doing is disgraceful. They know that they're abandoning people. They're aware of it. How do they know? Because we tell them. But their job is not to respond to us. Their job is to deflect our anger away from their corporate owners. That's their job, is to take our ire and to take our anger, right? So that we don't actually go to the house of these billionaires and actually do something about it. Like, that's their job. And they get rewarded handsomely for doing their job. Here's a great article. This one comes from Barnabas from the live stream, from the Discord, I should say. Why Canada's plan to criminalize Holocaust denial could be unconstitutional and redundant. I don't think I'm going to read the whole of the article, but it is kind of shocking that there's an article being written that is sort of saying, hey, we shouldn't criminalize Holocaust denial. We shouldn't say that, like, people, like, why are we constantly defending Nazis? You know, that's my big question. Why are we constantly in this position where we're defending Nazis and we're trying to pretend as though Nazism isn't such a big deal? Like, I've seen in the States, they want to there are states that are going to start teaching victims of communism, right? Like, literally just going to be Nazi apologetia, right? Isn't poverty only an accurate word and concept within capitalism? I mean, was there poverty under feudalism or hunter-gatherers? Isn't poverty a fundamental aspect of capitalism? Yeah, you can't have rich if you don't have poor. It's very simple. DM, good to see you, bud. I was hurt until I realized they were just desperate to stay attached to their communities. Yeah. Yet maintaining a relationship with an atheist is risky to their status, of course. Yeah, of course. Like, it is, at the end of the day, all about material conditions, right? We are having a conversation about like staying alive, right? Incremental abandonment is what the conservatives and liberal politicians are using to keep status quo ho-hum. Yeah, one little step forward, two big steps back. I mean, that's what today's video is about, right? Like, we've got the liberals here in Ontario saying, we're gonna up ODSP by 20%. Well, back in the 90s, it was cut by 25%, right? So we're literally back. Like, even if we get what we want from these liberals, we're still farther back, right? That's the goal, right? It's just a race to the bottom as fast as we can go. I disagree with you, but I'll defend your free speech to to speak hate to the death. Yeah, exactly. And, like, Nazis don't have free speech. Like, that's like, I really dislike this idea of the paradox of tolerance that was presented. I really dislike this because it's really muddied the conversation, in my view, right? That we all exist in a society, and one of the crucial aspects of law in society is that when laws are passed, like, if laws are to be legitimate, they must apply to everyone equally, right? If laws are to be legitimate, they must be adhered to universally by all citizens, or else the system has no legitimacy. It's a big reason why I say the American system no longer has any legitimacy, because the laws don't apply to the rich. There's a class of citizenry where the laws don't apply. And but a Nazi is a person who stands up and says the law should not apply to a specific group of people. Rights and protections should not apply to a specific group of people. And so it is not a paradox to say to a person whose position is, I want to eradicate a group of people based on their ethnicity, that, oh, okay, very well. If you want to remove the rights of certain individuals, then we'll go along with that, except the people we're choosing to do it to are you. And so it is no paradox. We're taking their position and we're applying it to them. Right? It's not a paradox to do this. Right? They are violating the universal precept of what makes a society, which is that laws apply to everyone. Right? If the society is to have any legitimacy whatsoever. That's ultimately why Jim Crow laws and redlining and the Indian Act and all of these things delegitimize the enterprise and need to be dismantled, because they are not applied equally. They are not applying the law equally. They are singling people out. Like, fascists do and Nazis do, so we don't need to take them serious. Yeah, and exactly, illegal to deny the Holocaust, but perfectly legal to use our tax dollars to arm Nazis in Ukraine. Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. And not that we're going to talk about it. Like, the thing I've been noticing, like, there's like a very, like, you can go to the Ottawa Citizen. Like, it's easy to find now. Even CTV is reporting on it. I've seen Globe and Mail articles talking about it, right? This is easy information to find. What happens if you share these articles on the internet? You either get banned, or if you share them in places where they're not going to ban you for that kind of stuff, because there are subreddits that are explicitly like that, you're just ignored, right? Like, they literally will not talk to you. That's where we're at as a citizenry. Like, we know this is wrong. We know this is wrong, right? So we're just not going to talk about it. And people are going to get into a position like, why do you need to talk about this, right? We're not going to go down quietly. That's why. Like, we're not gonna quietly subserviate ourselves to fucking Nazis and Nazism. It's absolutely brutal. Oh yeah, Sri Lanka. I was reading up on Sri Lanka because Sri Lanka MP among 5 killed as violence escalates. Right? We've got a revolution situation happening. Right? An MP has been lynched by a crowd of workers reportedly during clashes. Multiple reports of government homes being stormed and set ablaze. The Prime Minister has resigned. Clashes with workers and law enforcement are being reported. MP died during an armed standoff with workers after firing multiple rounds from a handgun into the crowd. Uprisings started in retaliation against attacks by pro-Rajapaksa supporters on peaceful protests. The military has been mobilized to defend government residences. Administrative Secretary Renuka Pereira's house has been stormed by a crowd of workers. Curfew put in place. Rumors circulating about the Prime Minister attempting to flee, and many communist parties have joined and supported the protests. Sri Lanka, of course. Let's get our map, as always. Just off the coast of India. Right? We are starting to see more and more serious communist movements take hold in India. We are starting to see the influence of China starting to move into India in serious ways. I can't imagine what it would be like to be living in India under Modi right now, and then right across the way, here's China, right? Like, I can't imagine. The prime minister that resigned is brother to the president. There you go. Yeah, Pax Americana was always their ally, right? Americans lying? No shit. Like Manifest Destiny? All that crazy shit? No shit. Illegal to deny the Holocaust? No. I shared a redfish video on Facebook and gave it a warning that this could be Russia state funded. Of course. No, that's their whole thing now. Like, liberals are falling into this Russian propaganda. Like, that's really what's happening. That if you confront them with something that goes against their worldview, they can just say Russian propaganda and that's it. The barrier is up, right? They don't need to move any further, and they don't want to because they're comfortable, right? Like, they've already concluded that the thing to do in this life is to sell themselves to a capitalist death cult, which they do every day, right? And that fulfills their need for food and shelter, right? They've already sacrificed their personality and their personhood to a corporate power or to some kind of institutional power, which they allow to define them, and once they are defined in such a way, any threat to that, no matter how legitimate, should be ignored until finally the fire is burning down the place, right? Like, it's like the conversation we were having before about Christianity. Like, a lot of these Christians don't bother reading the text, and they just want to get what their pastor or minister has to say about it so that they can stay in the in-group. Well, that kind of thinking is just as true in corporate America. That kind of thinking is just as true for government civil servants, right? That kind of thinking is just as true for those sorts of people. They don't want to confront the evil things or the dark things that their culture, their society is responsible for, because they know that they are tied to the in-group. And as long as they sacrifice themselves to it, and as long as they keep doing that, then their food and shelter is taken care of, and they won't be abandoned until they are. I remember Jerry Falwell and his moral majority during the Reagan years. It was pretty obviously Christian fascism, but no one did anything about it, especially Christians. Yeah, that's the real failing, if you ask me. That the secular society doesn't really have the responsibility to confront these things, because the secular society is standing there going, okay, this is a bunch of kooky Christians, right? Like that, or forget kooky Christians. This is a bunch of Christians, right? This is a Christian issue. We're secularists and atheists. Like, our position is that this is not something we're interested in, right? The real failing is the Christian left. That's the real failing. And in the Christian left, you have the Catholic Church to a degree, the Anglican Church for sure, right? Amongst other, the Presbyterians, right? Like, the rise of evangelicalism and the adherence to its obviously heretical dogmas, right? Like, some of the shit that the evangelicals say is like outright, like, no. Like the prosperity gospel. This idea that if you work hard, God will reward you, right? The inference being, of course, that if you're poor, it's your fault, that God is punishing you, right? Well, like, literally that's heretical. Straight up. Like, black and white. Like, I know that when we say heresy, right, there's this, like, Warhammer kind of thing where, like, heresy by the emperor, right? But if you're going to follow a religious text, and if you're going to say that you're an adherent of the text, and then what you espouse the text says is the opposite of what the text says, then you're a heretic. There's just no other word to use, right? Like, if your Bible says, give money to the poor, and you say giving money to the poor is an abomination by God that affronts him, then you're a heretic. Pretty straightforwardly. I had a lib telling me that the CBC, BBC, PBS are neutral news sources because it is state-funded while supporting the ban of RT. Yeah. Like, there is no such thing as a neutral news source, okay? Like, you can read the CBC and the BBC and PBS and all these guys. Like, I say it all the time, right? You can read these guys and you can get good sources and good information from them, but know who they are and know where their bias lies. Like you're not gonna watch CNN. Like when you watch CNN, you're watching the CIA. Like that's what you're watching, and that's fine, right? Just as long as you know that that's the case. And like the CBC, it's like, yeah, like that's state funded. Like that's the Liberal Party line. Like the stuff that gets published there is largely going to be inoffensive to the Liberal Party at the moment because they're the ruling party, right? And to support the ban of RT is just like you can watch RT as long as you know it's RT, as long as you know that what you're watching is Russian propaganda, right? Advertisements, sermons, and nationalist propaganda are pretty much alike when you look at it enough. Appeal to monkey, promise utopia, call to action, demand for money. Yeah. See, that's kind of scary, Bumble, because what am I doing here, right? Appeal to monkey, promise utopia. I mean, I'm not promising utopia. Call to action, I definitely do that. And demand for money. Give me money. Like, share, subscribe. Like, share, subscribe. All the fun stuff. Funny thing, the Redfish video had nothing to do with Russia. It was an Irish... Oh, yes, I've seen this. An Irish MEP blasting Poland for accepting Ukrainian refugees while putting in measures to stop Syrian and other refugees. Oh, yeah. Like, this to me is one of the great unspoken scandals, right? If they're Ukrainian refugees, it's like, open the doors forever. 100 million Ukrainian refugees. Just don't bother even checking them. Let all of them in because they have white skin and blue eyes and are blonde, right? Like it's very straightforward, right? Just open up the door to as many Ukrainians as you want. Oh, but those dirty brown people. No, can't do that. Can't do that. Right? It's as straightforward racism as you can find. Like I actually can't think of a more clear cut racism in this society, right? The Christian left was liberation theology, but was demonized out of the conversation by 95. Yeah. It's not possible to have a non-objective news reporting. I mean, the decision of what story to report is so very subjective. Yeah. Like the decision on what to even talk about, right? And then when they talk about it, right? Like take a look at what the Globe and Mail did to in terms of the Azov conversation. It was just like a bunch of hand waving, like Nazi apologetics, right? Yeah, my fake news is superior to your fake news. My fake news is superior to your fake news. Exactly. Like, no, it is better to read all sources. And of course, like, once a place proves to you that they're not capable of telling the truth, like the Fraser Institute, like I'm at 0% for the Fraser Institute. Like if I'm reading an article from like, and the main offender is the National Post. But if I'm reading an article from the National Post and they're like the Fraser Institute, I literally just like, nope, we're good. And I'm done. I don't need to listen to them. Monkey money! Thanks, Bumbleguppy. I appreciate that, bud. $2. Even $2 is nice. That's very kind of you. Thank you so much, bud. I could use some monkey money. Although, I'd love to have an owl. That's what I'd love to have. I've looked into that, though. It's very expensive. Very expensive to have an owl. Oh, yeah. I don't really, like... To me, this isn't a doom and gloom story. This story right here is like a happy little moment for me as far as I'm concerned. 40% of Bitcoin investors are now underwater. New data shows. Get fucked. Get totally fucked, Bitcoin investors. Like, I hope you're underwater. Like, Bitcoin is an abomination. It should be completely shut down. The idea that we should have a decentralized currency, right? Darius, don't think I've ever seen you here before, buddy. Good to see you. I hope you're here to contribute. What do you think about the food processing plants and food shortages coming our way? I mean, the food shortages are going to be big, dude. Like, there's no way to avoid it, right? Like, we're seeing way too many stories about farmers can't get access to fertilizer. The Ukrainian war is having an impact on the planting season for Ukraine. And I mean, Ukraine is responsible for like huge countries' grain, right? Big grain supply, all that kind of stuff. Peat moss is reaching the point where we can't use it any longer. Like, we are my position is that we are going to have to move to local food sources. That if you are capable of growing your own food, if you have a little plot of grass or something, pull it up, put something in there. I recommend beans. Beans are very versatile. And that's what's going to have to start to happen in big and serious ways, because we are going to experience food shortages. Especially as the global food chain starts to break down, especially as climate change starts to spread. Just last year, Manitoba, my home province, experienced a drought, right? And the droughts are going to get more serious, and things are going to the desertification of North America is going to be quite serious. And yeah, so I've said from the beginning, the famines are going to be the worst part. The famines are going to be the worst part. So it's up to us to be prepared, to be honest about what we're seeing, to not be delusional, and to not be proud. That's a big part of it. To not be proud. If you need to go to a food bank, go to a food bank. If you need help getting food, go get help. Swallow that pride. That pride is going to be a big thing for lots of people, and it is a big thing. It's going to be a big hurdle for lots and lots of people to accept that things have gotten this bad, and it is going to get bad. It's unavoidable at this point. It's unavoidable at this point. We're going to see the bread lines. We're gonna we've already seen that happening, right? So it is going to get more serious. And not to be a doomer prepper about it or anything, but that's just reality. And I don't see any evidence. For God's sakes, we've got the President of the United States of America saying that we're going to experience shortages, right? As much as we talk about how the system of American democracy has been delegitimized, and it has been, I mean, that's still a very prominent world figure, laying it out very clearly, right? And when Biden talks about it, he says it very clearly, we're going to see food shortages, Jack, right? That's who he is, and that's how it's coming. And so we need to be prepared for it. And so start supporting your local people. Start getting connected with local people. Start getting connected with people who know what's going on around you in terms of your food growing locally, right? That's because that's the way through, right? I see a lot of people, especially online people, who get real bunker mentality about it, right? They get really I personally need to be personally self-sufficient. That's not what's going to work, right? What's going to work is actually investing in your local community in serious ways, right? That and for me, this is something that I say for myself as well, that I have never really invested in a local community because I'm always destabilized, right? I'm always in this position where I'm constantly moving. I've moved across Canada several times. And this place that I'm in right now is the longest I've been in a place. And I might even have to move out of this place. And that makes it very difficult to want to get to know people in the area or get to invest in a local community. But it's something that I have to do for myself, and I personally have to do it. It's why I'm kind of digging my heels in and really trying to make it work right here, because I'm sick and tired of moving around. I'm sick and tired of dislocation. I'm sick and tired of restarting every single time. And things are going to get, part of where the anxiety comes from for organizers like us is that we have all of this world news, and everything seems very big on a meta scale. We're constantly beseeching federal powers and large world organizations and things like this. But the true path forward for us is your local government, municipal government, right? Because that's where you are. That's the community you're in. And we know that our federal governments and our international organizations are not responding rationally. So it's up to us on the most local level that you can find. And don't disparage the idea of going to your local church. Don't disparage the idea of going to a local religious organization. Don't disparage any of that, right? And organize. And be clear-minded and clear in your statements. And this, I think, is the most important part. Do not be embarrassed about talking about this and being honest and serious about your intentions, right? Don't try to trick people into, or not trick people, but don't try to bury the lead, right? Tell people that you are organizing local community organizations to protect against coming food shortages and famines. I think you're going to gain a lot more traction talking that way, right? Because lots of people think this way. Lots of people think this way. And it's just whether or not they're actually talking about it. So it's and we've got to be really honest about it. We've got to be really, really honest about it. Like, the food shortages are coming. I don't see how we avoid it. Like, if we did like a full pumping of the brakes right now and did everything we possibly could to actually turn around and say, here we go, like, we're gonna address this, we still would experience food shortages. So they're coming. And it doesn't make you a crazy kook, and it doesn't make you a conspiracy theorist or a doomer or a bunker boy or any of that kind of stuff. To tell the truth and be honest about it and to prepare. Anyone paying attention to the Ontario election, 2 PC MPPs were got big money laundering and taking away from lobbyists, of course. Ontario sucks. I mean, I was just talking about this, I think, yesterday. Oh, here you go. Yeah, here you go, bud. New Nanos poll has the PCs leading by just 5 points, right? They're down 6 points. The Liberal Party up 10 points. NDP down 10 points. Looks like the populace, if it swings to the left, right, it's going to do what it always does, right? Oh, we went liberal, and then we went conservative, and then we went liberal again, right? Now, to be fair to the liberals, right, I actually think, like, I recently went through Kathleen Wynne and Dalton McGuinty's record again, and I actually do think those guys were trying. Like, you take a look at the climate change file, right? It's undeniable. They were really, really trying to get emissions down in this country and in this province, and they were successful to a fairly large degree, right? They were doing some very serious things. If we had have been adults about it, right, and accepted that, like, yeah, we're going to have to accept some sacrifices, and that means a higher hydro bill, right? If we had been adults about it, we would have never ended up with Ford. But that's not life, right? So, looks to me like the Ontarians are going, if they swing away from the Conservatives, they'll swing back towards the Liberal Party. And you do have Del Duca promising things like a 20% increase to ODSP, which is still below the Mike Harris cuts back in the 90s. But it's better than the 0 that's happening now. So we'll see. What do I always say, guys? What do I always say? Canadians do not pay attention to politics until an election, right? That and during the election season, political opinion can change wildly. It can. I have seen flips in public opinion. Literal, like, this guy's polling at 10%, this guy's polling at 60%, going along. Election writ dropped. 2 days later, it flips. I have seen it. Canadians do not pay attention to politics until it's time to pay attention to politics. That's how we are. Because I think it's completely understandable. Everyone's exhausted, tired, beleaguered. This is psychic damage. It's too difficult to pay attention to. And so nut jobs like me that do it, right? They might tune in to me and watch like a half hour or like a 10-minute clip of me being like, this is happening, then this and this and this, and that's what they use to inform themselves. So they tune in right at election to guys like me, and of course, like, the Globe and Mail and all the rest, right? So I actually expect that this is going to get worse for the PCs, because as people actually tune in, it's undeniable. Like, these Conservatives suck. They suck. Like, Doug Ford might go down in history as the worst premier the province has ever had. That the smartest thing that he ever did as premier was when the pandemic began, he said, I'm in over my head and I'm going to let the experts run the show. That was the smartest thing he ever did, right? Was to basically say, I'm incompetent. Let's let experts run the place. He should have done that for the whole time, if you ask me. Bitcoin, NFT are pyramid schemes, only with the expensive pyramid. Just only without the expensive pyramid, just the drawing of a pyramid. Yeah, exactly, dude. Fuck these people. Like, I have no sympathy whatsoever. Not even a shred. Like, you know what? That's not true. I do feel bad if you're like one of the rubes who like literally took out your savings, right, to get into the Bitcoin game, and you bought into the hype on that kind of level, and now you're fucked, right? Like, I do feel bad for those guys because they got conned really hard. I was always suspicious of Bitcoin, but when Kevin O'Leary started selling Bitcoin and James Pattison started selling Bitcoin, I was like, this is a scam. I immediately knew it was a scam the second those guys started talking about it. Because it's just basically like, find a bigger idiot than you. Like, that's the whole scheme. Find a bigger idiot than you. I am more set that if Ford wins another majority, I'm leaving. I'm going to Europe, never coming back. Where in Europe, dude? Where are you going to go? 50 pounds of rice is a lot, bud. That's a lot. But yeah, I mean, it all counts now. I use Food Bank and Second Harvest as a good resource. Fantastic, dude. Like, like, I think I'm going to start donating a little bit of my time to my local food bank as well. Like, food is going to be a big part of it, right? And getting connected to those organizations, I think, is going to be really important. Get a cat. Rats are everywhere humans live. We'll see. The rats might be running. Even things grown close to home will be hard. The cost of soil and fertilizer going right up. Yeah, absolutely. If you can get, like, I'm seeing people who are getting plants in their house, right? They're just, like, literally just growing plants in their house. No cats. I'm in a rental. Oh, you're in the United States. That's why. Here in Ontario, the landlord and tenant board passed an edict saying all no pet contracts are void. So if it says no pets allowed in your rental contract, it's void, right? Because what was happening is that anytime there was like a legitimate complaint that was eviction worthy, it fell under some other category. Like your animal is destroying property, your animal's making noise in the middle of the night, right? But too often landlords were just using it as an excuse to evict people, right? This guy has a goldfish. This says no pets. He's out. Like, no. The suburb is a product of capital. The isolation is intentional. It's hard to connect when the whole system is railed against it. It's not shameful to struggle when it's made this way. Don't give up. Wise words, Bumbleguppy. Wise words. I have a visceral negative reaction to investing in any church community. I mean, I can respect that. Then get some ticks infected with some rat disease and tiny leashes. Del Duca got owned in the debate today. I don't know that anybody watched that, honestly. Like, I don't think that, though, that this particular debate is going to be particularly convincing to anybody, right? Like, and the reason why I say that is because of the nature of Ford Nation. That Ford Nation is not, like, you can't convince these guys, right? The people who are voting Doug Ford are voting Doug Ford because it's Doug Ford, and it's that simple, right? That if you say one word against them, it's like they're a soccer club, right? They're just soccer hooligans, and like if you say, like, if you start talking about climate change, oh, climate change is a hoax by the Chinese, right? No, you're not going to convince these guys. That's very simple. So I don't know that Del Duca getting owned in the debate is going to manifest into anything meaningful. I have my mail-in ballot right here, but it's like buying a lottery ticket. The odds of anything good happening for me are in the hundreds of billions. Yeah. Yeah, ODSP needs to be doubled. Yeah. Green Party is winning that battle. Well, they should win an election. That's what they should do. So many ex-NDPers going to vote Green now because of better housing program and doubling of ODSP. Yeah, I mean, I am basically out of the NDP. Like, they had their chance to come out bold, and if they had come out bold and strong with like strong statements on literally anything, I could have seen myself really pushing for Andrew Horwath. I like Andrew Horwath's story. I actually like Andrea Horvath, right? I think she presents as a substitute high school teacher, but I still like her. I just think that the NDP have run the worst campaign that I've maybe seen in the history of the country. Like, I can't think of a worse campaign than this. Like, their campaign, like, what's their platform even, right? Like, what's their platform? Like, I don't know why this is so difficult for the NDP to understand. Pick one topic, pick one subject, make a big claim about that subject, right? Slogan, run it. That's all you got to do. And it's just like it to me, it's a persistent leftist problem. That leftists get real like, oh, you've got to read theory, and you've got to, like, there's this big thing, and oh, if you only understood this huge PhD thesis argument, right? Oh, let's have this big debate and all this kind of stuff. No, that is not how it works. Full stop. If you are thinking that way, that, oh, we just need to have a big conversation or a discussion, or here, watch this hour-long YouTube video. No, the populace is not going to do it, right? They're not going to do it. Like, you can maybe get your buddies to do that, right? If you are running a campaign, and I don't know why the NDP cannot figure this out. It's across the board for these guys, and it's always been this way, and I don't understand it. One subject, pick the platform, run on it. You can have your platform document and all that kind of stuff, and that's great, right? But find the thing that everyone is going to go, whoa, even if they don't necessarily agree with it. Or even if they don't necessarily think, like, maybe, how are you going to pay for that? All that kind of stuff. Make one big claim. I'm going to lower your hydro bill. One big claim, right? Slogan. Claim, slogan, run it. Your campaign is over. Like, that's it. Like, that's the whole thing. And the NDP just seem to not get this, right? Like, they just don't understand it. And it blows me away. Every single election comes around, and I'm just sitting here being like, come on, NDP. Come on. And I actually had high hopes for the NDP this time, right? They were running, their initial ads were very good, I thought. I thought that they were running really nice ads against Ford and Del Duca right at the beginning, and then it just dissipated. It just turned into nothing. And then they start releasing ads with, like, ping pong paddles and, like, all this stupid shit. And it's stupid. It's just stupid, dumb shit. Like, people's food bills are going through the roof. People's rent is going through the roof. The housing market is exploding. Most people are giving up on owning homes. Where's the fucking NDP? Nowhere. Get fucked. Get fucked. So, as near as I can tell, they deserve this loss. This is yet another well-deserved loss by the NDP. If you ask me. Learn how to run a campaign. I don't know how you, like, fire your campaign people. Hire me, right? Hire me because it's easy. Like, it's easier than you're making it. Like, it's way easier than you're making it. Like, you guys seem to think, like, the NDP seem to think that it's this big complex, like the meme of the woman with, like, the math and, like, thinking, oh, well, like, it's not like that. One claim, one slogan, run it. You're done. You're done. All the rest of it is ancillary. If you don't have a claim and a slogan, you don't have a campaign. Ugh. Just a reminder, this Saturday, the annual Basic Income March at Queen Park, 1 p.m. If anyone's coming by Toronto or in Toronto, I'm, of course, captured by Capital right at that moment, as always. Right? I'm working my job. Robin, how are you doing? I was thinking about you the other day. I hope you're doing well out there in the world, Robin. Oh, my God. I've been doing real well, Robin. I just got back not that long ago from a vacation with my siblings. My brother and my sister, we went out to Cape Breton. Had a beautiful, beautiful drive around Cape Breton. If you've ever got the chance to go to Cape Breton, I highly, highly recommend it. Really, really gorgeous up there. Really grounding experience, you know. Like, my brother and my sister are basically normies, right? They live their life very, very much 9-to-5 job kind of way, and I'm not at all. I wouldn't describe my life as particularly normal. It was very grounding, and it was very, like, because doing this work and being where I am can feel very airy-fairy and very loose and very frightening, right? Like doing a tightrope walk all the time. And oftentimes I feel like I'm doing it without a net. And going on that trip really reminded me that while I might be doing the tightrope walk, there's a net. There is a net. So that was it's a very beautiful thing to realize. And to realize that even though I think my siblings don't understand me, I think that they love me and they support me. And that's good enough. That's good enough. Yeah, checked out of politics lately because it's so bleak. Yeah, I mean, you got to be careful with that too, because it can be hard to be in isolation, right, Robin? Like, it can be. I know for me, like, a big reason why I do this, right? A big reason why I do this is because the isolation is harder. It's harder for me to read the news, and I can't not. Like, if you were to say to me, just stop reading the news, I'd be like, that's not going to happen. Like, that's not going to happen, dude. I've been doing that since I was, like, 14. I've been doing that since the beginning of time, right? Like this is what I've been doing all along. And I used to be isolated. And I've always wanted to do the YouTube channel. And now that I have been doing it, I can tell you straight up, it's easier to face it together than to attempt to ignore it in isolation. It is. It's easier. And but I understand it. Boy, do I understand it. Like, there is definitely like a bleakness. Yeah. Politics only seems hopeless if you put your hope in it. Yeah. And that's, like, I think a lot of the hopelessness comes from the expectation that we'll be able to change what is occurring in front of us. And it's better if you just accept that what we are doing is information gathering. That our actions don't come in the idea that we're going to change the Democratic Party or change the Republicans or change the Liberals. No. It comes from just understanding where we're at. And I was just saying earlier, connecting locally. Connecting locally. That's where the real thing is going to happen. Like, have you talked to your neighbors? Do you know the people in your building? Do you know the people around you? Do you know your local food bank? Do you know your local food growers and food producers? Right? That organizing locally is where politics is actually going to live. That it's easy to fall into the idea that it's all federated and it's all federal, right? It isn't. That your neighbors matter more to you politically than President Biden does. So that's my suggestion and my hope for you. I know, man, things are ridiculous right now, though, right? Things are fucking ridiculous. You just kind of got to ride the ridiculousness. The thing about conservatives is that all their voters want is their candidate destroys their perceived enemies, even when it's their fellow citizens. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about with the tribalism, man. Like, the tribalism's taken hold in big and serious ways. Hugh Siegel and Floyd M. will be speaking at the march. Oh, yeah. I hope somebody records these things. If you're there, DM, record some of this stuff, right? Like, I'd like to see some of this information. Like, and I've talked to Hugh Siegel. Like, Hugh Siegel's a big supporter of the basic income. Oh, yeah. Horvath missed the mark. Basic income would have been the issue. I mean, this is what I'm saying. Like, she could have picked that as a big issue, right? But just a tepid, it's very tepid. Just very tepid. Capital is the hole in the bucket of hope. Bumbleguppy. You gotta write this shit down, bud. You gotta write. That's a good one. Capital is the hole in the bucket of hope. Oh my god. Oh yeah, I love this one. I love this one. The WEF conspiracy theory is in the conservative leadership race in Canada's main streets. So, this is what happens to a society that doesn't actually have a critical analysis of itself, right? Maybe if we drag the capitalists into the town square and patch their holes, quote unquote. I mean, stranger things, stranger things. The World Economic Forum, right? This has become something of a talking point amongst the right wing that there is an international organization called the World Economic Forum, right? And if you actually dig into the history of the World Economic Forum, you find out that it was started by Nazis, which is always good, right? And there are a lot of prominent Canadian politicians who are involved in this organization, right? Which is absolutely the truth. That Justin Trudeau is, Jagmeet Singh is, Pierre Poilievre has his name at one point in his early career, although he's done a good job of distancing himself since. And like, conservatives will talk about this as if this is like this powerful organization. That this is the Spectre in the James Bond narrative, right? That like, here's the sinister, overreaching organization that's penetrating our cabinets and getting involved in all this kind of stuff. And I'm not going to say that it's not somewhat concerning, right? But I also am happy to say that it's quite normal that an international community would be created where politicians would come to discuss larger ideas with one another and to get a sense of what's actually happening, right? Like the World Economic Forum, Davos, and all this kind of stuff. You come and you communicate with one another in the hopes of making arrangements and deals with one another, right? And sure, it's neoliberal in its outlook, for sure. Like, it absolutely is. But like, I'm way less concerned about the World Economic Forum than I am about BlackRock. Like, you want to talk about an organization that I actually think we should be majorly concerned with, it's BlackRock. Why? Because they own everything, right? Like, who cares what they say at the World Economic Forum? Like, who actually gives a shit? If the politicians all get together and create this big plan and sign off on it, and then they all turn to BlackRock, and BlackRock goes, nah, then that's it. Like, that's it. So this, near as I can tell, this World Economic Forum conspiracy theory is useful for the conservatives to brandish for two major reasons. One, it goes against the leftist leftist, but the liberal NDP consensus, right? It's a very easy narrative that like, oh look, Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh are part of this large international community. And that large international community, the global elitists that we've been hearing so much about, they're the ones that are inflicting all of this. And so the problem is government. And the problem is the government overreach that's coming from the World Economic Forum, right? Well, okay, so what's the solution? The solution is to vote conservative, and I'll get rid of these world economic idiots. They'll be gone, right? And so you do. And let's say Poilievre gets in. Well, what's Poilievre going to do? He's going to get rid of the World Economic Forum idiots, but he's still going to do what BlackRock says, right? He's still going to pay attention to BlackRock. So it's a useful political tool for the conservatives to create a frame, right? And to draw people towards them in the idea that there's these globalists that are, oh, you can exclude Trudeau and all this kind of stuff. And it's also useful for the conservatives because it completely deflects political energy and attention away from where the actual power centers are. And clearly the power centers exist in who owns what, right? Like BlackRock owns like 70% of America. Like it owns trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of assets. I literally read an audiobook out loud for money called Sustainable Investing, where a guy went through how many assets BlackRock actually owns. It's trillions of dollars, right? Larry Fink, the CEO, is probably the most important figure in America right now, without a doubt, right? And we're not talking about that, right? Nobody pays attention to that. Nobody gives a shit about that. What do we care about? Oh, we care about the World Economic Forum, where a bunch of politicians get together and do nothing important, right? Like, what actually happens at the World Economic Forum? Like, for real. Like, a bunch of politicians, right? So the courtiers of the actual ownership class get together, jerk each other off, say maybe we'll give a shit about certain things, right? And then say some stuff so that their own constituents, as well as people at home, can hear them say it on an international stage. But they don't reach any agreements, they don't pass any laws, they don't write any bills, they don't do anything important, it doesn't matter. It's just a big wank. It's just a big show, right? And who are the people actually making the decisions? It's fucking people like Vanguard and BlackRock. Like, so it's extremely useful for the conservatives to do. And once again, it just flows into the central problem of our society, which is we have zero class consciousness whatsoever. Like, imagine being more concerned about the WEF, the World Economic Forum, than you are about the actual owner of the society. Like, come on. Like, fucking come on. Like, it's astounding to me that anybody would care. Like, you could care about the World Economic Forum. It is an opportunity to hear what Trudeau and other world leaders have to say, right? And what they want to send into the world. But, like, it's not law. It's not any of this shit. Anyway. So, but as I've been saying this whole time, right? Poilievre is a very dangerous leader for the Conservative Party, or for Canada to have in the Conservative Party, because Poilievre has figured something out that other federal conservative leaders, including Stephen Harper, haven't figured out, which is that Canadians love liars. We love to vote for liars, right? Whether that's from just a respect or complete and total gullibility, right? If someone stands up in front, if a politician stands up in front of the population and says a whole bunch of bullshit, we vote for them, right? Case in point, Doug Ford. Jason Kenney's another one, right? Just a guy who stood up and lied his face off completely, told a bunch of bullshit, hasn't followed through on any of his promises, and literally did the opposite of what he said he was going to do, right? That's Doug Ford and Jason Kenney to a T, right? Poilievre has figured it out. Scheer hadn't figured it out. O'Toole hadn't figured it out, right? They both attempted to run like kind of a spin campaign to make conservatism look as good as possible and to like be honest about confronting the challenges and all this kind of, that was always their spin. Poilievre's not doing any of that. Poilievre understands, oh, if I just lie, I'll win. Another case in point, Justin Trudeau, right? What did Justin Trudeau run on? I am going, that this will be the last election that is first past the post. Womp, womp, womp. Jean Chrétien, I will eliminate the GST. Womp, womp, womp. Poilievre's figured it out. Just lie. That's how you win elections here in Canada. And he's doing it. And he's doing it really, really well. Like, watch any of Poilievre's stuff. Anything. Find any clip that he's releasing. Yeah, find it on TikTok. Find it on YouTube. Right? He is excellent. He's picking up. He's literally talking communist talking points. He's literally reading the Communist Manifesto and saying those words back to a populace that has an upswell of socialists and communists in it. Right? He's talking simultaneously to the far-right fringe lunatic libertarians who sound like communists until the solutions hit the table, as well as the social progressives, should they actually exist any longer, and the communists and the socialists that exist in the society, right? Because he knows how thin these margins are. He knows how thin these margins are. The margins for the federal election are so crazy thin. Like, the Conservatives need 30 seats. They need 30 seats to become a majority ruling party, right? And the seats that they lose to Liberals, usually, they're losing by 1 to 5%. The margins are thin. Those are thin margins. So if all Poilievre has to do to become the Prime Minister of Canada is lie, he will. And he's doing it extremely well. Extremely well. Ugh. What's up next? Rent control. Building more houses. Key promises as Ontario Liberals unveil platform. Now, the rent control sounds good, but really it's just essentially keep things as they are, right? Like, currently, most landlords can only increase rent by 1.2% per year. However, that increase can be higher if rental units in buildings occupied for the first time after November 15th, 2018. So basically, they're just saying, we're not going to let them raise rents between tenants, right? So the yearly raise rent is going to be completely fine, right? So my rent's going to always go up. Do my wages go up? No, but the rent goes up, and so they're keeping that in place, right? Like if these liberals, honestly, guys, like I'll be straight up with you, if these liberals stood up and said we're going to reduce rent by like 10%, we're just going to cut people's rent by about 10%. If they said even 10%, I'd be like liberal. I wouldn't even think about it, honestly. Like that's how desperate things are. That's how bad things are, right? But they're bullshitting us again. Like it's just faffy nonsense, right? Like it's just like, oh, rent control in the most like sideways, circuitous sort of way you can possibly imagine, right? Polyev needs to convince the PPC voters to vote Conservative. That's exactly right, Dion. Like, that's exactly right. Like you listen to him. He sounds very, but is it working? Like that's the big question. Is it working? Right? I think that a lot of the PPC voters, a lot of people who are voting PPC, have broken up with the Conservative Party. Right? Like and breakups are hard. Breakups are hard to recover from. In addition, the party says it would create a legal framework that would establish rent-to-own programs, so renters could potentially buy their home from their landlord. Meanwhile, it would punish landlords who keep homes vacant in urban areas by taxing them. International owners would pay a 5% tax, while domestic owners would pay a 2% tax. Like, it's meaningless. Like, the people we're talking about are billionaires. Like, fucking billionaires, right? They don't care. Like, it literally doesn't matter to them. Like, it's just like, how about just, like, instead of saying landlords who keep their homes vacant in urban areas by taxing them, how about saying punish landlords who keep their homes vacant by removing their housing? Like, oh, you want that to be vacant? You have 1 month to fill it. Not full? We own it. By, like... that I would consider that an acceptable response. I don't consider that to be extreme. I don't consider that to be absurd. Oh, you're removing a human right from people. No. Nope. Fill that, use it or lose it. And that's what I would call the law. I would write the law and I would call it use it or lose it. John Sanderson. Vote John. The John Party. My platform is really easy. Fuck the rich. Life should be easier. There's my whole slogan. Life should be easier. Making life easier. There we did. John. Making life easier. Right? Vote me. And this is the other thing that the NDP and the Liberals really get in their own ass about, dude. The slogans that they pick suck. They're all very, like, wafy and all very, like, oh, dream in the Swisian space. Doug Ford's slogan was for the people. Like, easy slogans sell. Like, make life easier. There you go. You did it. Like, for fuck's sake. For fuck's sake. Reddit. What else do I got here? Ontario PCs follow other major parties in announcing an increase to ODSP. Oh yeah, this is hilarious, dude. So like, the other parties say, oh, like Del Duca is talking about, we're going to increase it by 20%. We're gonna. The Greens are saying they're going to double it, right? Like there's there's all kinds of things. What's the Conservatives thing? We're gonna raise it by 5%. It was a 6 today, mocked. We already did it. It was a 6. Yeah, I know, but I was disappointed too. I was pulling though. I was pulling. Like, who the fuck is voting these Conservatives, dude? like, is it just like a town full of Mr. Burnses? Is that all it is? Mr. Burns. Do, 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 do. Okay. John Tory ends Toronto's COVID-19 emergency declaration. We knew it was coming. It's now official, right? Pandemic over. There's just no more anything, right? We've made it through this emergency period thanks to our dedicated city staff who confronted this global pandemic, the greatest challenge of our generation. With a determination to do everything we can to help residents and continue to deliver much-needed municipal services. Unless you were sleeping in a park, right, Tori? If you were sleeping in a park, you got beat up by cops. As Team Toronto's world-leading COVID-19 vaccination campaign continues, I want to thank everyone who has worked to help people get vaccinated and deliver more than 7 million doses so far. Most importantly, I want to thank Toronto residents who have worked with us throughout the emergency period of the pandemic to make sure we get through these tough times and come back stronger than ever. Open for business, right? The John party sounds like the guys who used to pay me for sexual favors. Well, pissed off. Lucky. The John party. Yeah, I guess that's true, right? That's the thing with the name John. Like, we get to be men who use prostitutes, dead bodies, right? John Doe, toilets, right? You're welcome, by the way. So we take that a bit on the nose, right? John is an honorable and stalwart name, powerful and strong. We can withstand these besmirchments, for we are Johns. I love this story, man. I love this story. Green activist torch former minister's car in TMR. A Jaguar and a Land Rover belonging to former Stephen Harper cabinet minister Michael Fortier were torched and destroyed in the early morning hours of May 4th, the SPVM told the media. The incident took place on Chester Avenue. No one was injured. Following the incident, the anarchist group Montreal Counter-Information posted an anonymous submission saying, "Late in the night on May 4th, individuals acting in the spirit of vengeance visited the home of Michael Fortier on Chester Avenue. Today, he is the vice chairman of capital markets at the Royal Bank of Canada. Tucked away in his big house in the town of Mont-Royal, a wealthy Montreal neighborhood separated by a long wall from the poor and exploited, Mr. Fortier no doubt feels at ease with his employer's decision to continue funding the Coastal GasLink pipeline or any other disgusting project financed by RBC. The submission adds that as glaciers melt and drought, fire, and famine spread, Mr. Fortier may think that his money and connections will protect him, his children, and his grandchildren. But the ecologically dispossessed will know the names of those responsible. He must understand that no one is safe amid this storm. On the night in question, flames spread from an incendiary device to the engine block of his Jaguar, parked in front of his home. This act is in solidarity with Wet'suwet'en land defenders and all those who fight the extractive industry. The SPVM told the media that those living in the home did not receive any threats before the incident took place. They are looking into the latter and possible motives for the fire. I think that's probably a pretty straightforward motive, don't you think? Right? This kind of thing is going to happen more, right? It's going to happen more. It's going to get bigger. It's going to get more audacious. It's going to get more ridiculous. It's going to get more organized, right? Yeah. Saw a lame lib say, wow, great job wasting resources. He's just going to buy a new one. Make him. And then another one. And then another one. Make him. Make him spend his resources on that. Do it. Make him. Like, the silence or the inaction is what blows me away the most, frankly. That, like, I sing this song, right? 2020, right? We're gonna burn to death while doing what we're told. Here, let's do it. Let's do it. Right? Like, I can't. That's the thing that I can't believe. Like, I talk to people who, like, literally, like, have this nihilist attitude that, like, oh, well, it's all over. What are we going to do? And I'm like, what are we going to do? What are you talking about? We've tried nothing. We've tried literally nothing. Like, wow, we've done nothing and we're all out of ideas. Another month inside this car. The wage they pay me with don't get me very far. The chains that hold me break me down, but they don't scar. Can't even drink away my blues inside a bar. And this year sucks. This year sucks. Can you blame a man for trying to give it up? And this year sucks. Another day won't help that pain inside your back. The days get harder, but it's too hard to keep track. They keep you tied before your soul opens a crack. And God don't care what monkeys think about the facts. And this year sucks. This year sucks. Can you blame a man for trying to give it up? And this year sucks. So sit atop your pile of bones and bloody gold, and human sacrifice don't stop you being old. At least you'll die before the bomb you said explodes. We're gonna burn to death while doing what we're told. And this year sucks. This year sucks. Can you blame a man for trying to give it up? And this year sucks. It burns down anyway. It burns down anyway. It burns down anyway. It burns down anyway. Yeah. As an amateur mechanic, I can assure you, the only reason to purchase a Jaguar is to show off you don't care about money anymore. Exactly, dude. Exactly. Insurance will cover it, yeah. Hopefully the insurance premiums will go up. Yang Chen, don't think I've ever seen you here before. Good to see you. Igor, good to see you too, bud. Good to see you too. Ah, man. Comedy open mic nights have opened up here in Toronto, but there's like no open mic nights for music, and it's killing me. It's killing me, man. Like, that song that I've been playing for you guys this whole time, I'm yet to play in front of an audience. And I know it's good. Like, I know it's good. But boy, do I want the energy. I want the energy. I really do. Like, you guys are lovely about it, but... Ugh. Ugh. Well, I'm out of news articles, guys. Like, I'm out of news articles. So it's just us now, right? Just us having a nice conversation about what the world's going on. What's happening in the world. Who thinks what and what thinks who, right? You know what? You know a song I do want to play? I haven't played this one in a couple of weeks, actually. Got asked a question by my niece who's 5 years old. What's the world gonna be like when I'm grown? I looked up at the crimson smoke-filled sky. I thought, what's the harm in telling one more lie? I said, everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry when you're gonna get to Eden. Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy. Wouldn't that be nice? The burning sun won't leave a paper trail. Why work so hard if it's too big to fail? And what's the point of feeding this machine if it won't make the world in our dreams where everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets? You never need to worry if you're gonna get to Eden. Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? And I know one day my maker I will meet, when death's sweet kiss comes to sweep me off my feet. I hope by then we've learned a little more. I'd like this place to be better than before, so everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to Eden. Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice when everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets? You never need to worry if you're gonna get to Eden. Antarctica is covered in ice. Antarctica is covered in ice. Well, hopefully that's a good song to leave on, Famita. And even now, even now. And this is what separates me, and maybe what makes me the oddball and the weirdo. But even now, I still believe that we can do it. That the solution to this problem is actually far easier than we want to admit. It's far easier than we want to believe. That we don't need to be clever. We don't need to be intelligent. We don't even need to be wise. What we need to be is humble. That we need to acknowledge that we are not the most powerful force on this planet. That humanity is not at the top of a chain or the top of a pyramid, but rather amidst many that exist within the holistic existence of the powerful energy of the earth itself. We don't need to invent something. We don't need to create something. We don't need to make a new way to live or any of these things. The earth made a garden before we were even here, before it even created us. Which it did, by the way, and we seem to have forgotten that the earth created us. And if we want to be here, to witness the absolute miracle of the earth healing itself, which it's more than capable of doing, then all we have to do is stop. That's the big question. Can we stop? We're like junkies, Have a good night, Demand Better. Good to see you, bud. We're like junkies. We're connected to this superpower, to this enormous force of energy that has swept us up in a mass hysteria. And it is absolutely a mass hysteria. And if we're going to roll out of it, it's going to be through sacrifice and humility. That there is no other path. But the sacrifices are so... I compare the sacrifices that we are asking our population to go through to the sacrifices that our grandparents went through, and even our parents. And they're juvenile in comparison. That's what makes this whole conversation so ridiculous to me. And it makes it so impossible. How do we have a serious conversation when the people who are resisting so hard are resisting not out of fear for their own lives or fear for having to go into a war or a fight, but from fear that they are going to not have access to their toys? How did we get here? How did we get here where we have an entire society that is looking at the future of their own children and saying, forget about it? I think that's the part about it that is incomprehensible to me. Has there ever been a generation that has looked at their own children and said, ah? Hasn't the narrative always been, we want a better life? Hasn't the narrative always been, we want to make something better? I think a big issue is that our population expanded and our technological capacity expanded so rapidly that when you actually look at a graph of all of human history and the growth and the technological advancement that we went through, it looks exactly like this. And it just takes right off, right? It's not a slow, steady up. It's very much like right to the moon. And it looks as though we're going to plateau. It looks like 11 billion is where we're going to plateau at. Maybe we'll go a little bit above that and maybe a little below that even. But we are plateauing. And there likely will become a decline that follows, right? That's likely to occur. But like, I don't think that we were meant to grow and expand ourselves as humans this quickly. Like, I think that there are a lot of people in the world where something like climate change is just science fiction to them. You know? It's completely, like, they can't even, it sounds like fiction. And it's got to be something from like Star Trek or Star Wars, you know, just a script from a novel or something that they probably weren't going to read in the first place. And I think that there's just like even without the disinformation, right? Because the disinformation is a whole other conversation. Like, those people should be criminalized. Like the people. No, it's not Malthusian, right? It's not Malthus, right? Like, it's because the Malthusianism says that we grow exponentially and then think, so we got to cut things off and all this kind of stuff. No, we are plateauing. We are reaching a point where we are not growing anymore. And moreover, I actually believe that the Earth has the resources that we could use to sustain us. The issue is that we're just polluting the shit out of this place and throwing away all this fucking food. Like, we're being as wasteful as we can be. We're still doing it, right? So the issue isn't our population growth. The issue is our waste, right? The issue is how wasteful we are and how stupid we are. Like, do we genuinely believe this country is actually doing anything about climate change when you can walk into a toy store and pick up plastic garbage off the shelf? Of course not. What a joke. Like, what a total joke. That the thing that kills humanity is not population growth, but hubris. That we're just doing everything we can to ignore the fact that we live in a gigantic system. We're still pretending as though humanity is the most powerful force on the earth, and it isn't. The most powerful force on the earth is the earth itself. And if we don't recognize that, if we don't at least contemplate on it, we are going to wipe ourselves out. Because we're just going to keep acting this way. With no sense of place in the universe. And I do strongly believe it. There are very few hills that I actually will die on. And one of the hills that I absolutely will die on is that the earth is more than capable of healing itself. That our predictions about what the earth will or will not do are based on our limited information and our limited capacity to understand the system that we are observing and what we are doing. We've never seen, that's not true actually, we have seen the earth heal itself. When the pandemic started and we had to close this capitalist system down for a month, right? The earth immediately set about to healing itself. It was instant. Our emissions dropped precipitously. It happened instantaneously. The earth wants to heal itself. The earth is generative and regenerative. It's constantly doing it. It wants to do it. We just have to let it. That our success as a species is that we've become large enough that we can begin moving the meter at all within the system. That we've become, with the population of 10 billion people, we've become big enough and meddlesome enough that we can even move the bar at all. And who's going to suffer for it? Us, completely. That the earth will happily wipe us out and then recycle, because that's what it does. It might take it a couple 100,000 years, might take it 1,000,000 years, who cares? As far as the earth's concerned, that's nothing, it's the blink of an eye, right? We'll just be a bad rash it had once. Or we could just stop, right? We could just stop. I don't think people that crave wealth and power literally don't care about other things as a symptom of their mental illness. I mean, yeah, I think that there's something to this. And I think that there is like an NPCing of all things, right? Like if you try to view this place as a video game, right? Well, do you think it's a multiplayer game or do you think it's a single player game? Right? And I think if you're rich, it's a single player game. Right? That once you get wealthy enough, you can just surround yourself with yes men. Right? You never need to listen to a counter narrative. You never need to listen, and it's so difficult for counter narratives to even reach you, right? Because you have a whole system of people to vet those narratives out in the first place. So it's difficult for them to even reach you. And someone like Jeff Bezos, like how often do you think Jeff Bezos even sees a poor person? Like how often do you think he even sees a homeless person? Right? Probably never. Right? Probably never. And so they've created a reality around themselves, because they have enough wealth to be able to do so, that reflects their own desire in the single player game that they are playing. And everyone around them is just an NPC, a non-player character, someone that they don't really need to worry about. Because the only reason those people are around them is because of the wealth that they represent. And if they didn't have that wealth, those people wouldn't be there. Right? And so if you're living in a single player game where everyone around you is an NPC, well, that means the environment exists for your benefit exclusively. Right? You don't need to think about the next generation or the next iteration or anything like that, because this is a single player game. Right? It's not a multiplayer game. And if the earth burns down while you die, it makes no difference to you, right? Doesn't matter to you at all, because this world only exists for your benefit in the first place. And if the system is going to kill you, the only reason for existence to exist in the first place, right, which is to facilitate you, the single player that's playing the single player game, well, if it's going to have the audaciousness to kill you, then you might as well have the audaciousness to kill it back. Right? I think that this is what we are confronting more than anything. Is people who genuinely do not see other people in the world as players. Just they exist as NPCs. And the environment itself is not a living thing that is generative, that is way more powerful than they are or ever will be, that persists and continues, right? They just see it as an inert thing that exists exclusively for their benefit. Now, what can we do about it? What can be done? That's why I think these protests are so important. That's why I think real protest is important. To remind these people that we are not NPCs, that we are players. We are player characters. That's fundamentally what I mean. Like, we're getting into the closing minutes here, right? And that's fundamentally what I mean when I try to remind people that you're a quantum being, right? walking around in quantum energy. Right? You're not an NPC. You're not a non-player character. You're not ancillary. You're not secondary or tertiary. You're not a byproduct. You don't exist as a forgotten dust mote. You are the voice. One aspect, of course, but you are the voice of the quantum energy that we live in. You have the capacity to bring ideas out of the abstract space and to manifest them into reality. This incredible, unique ability that we're constantly told not to use because we need to sacrifice everything to the chaos death cult. I say these things to remind you of what you actually are. That you're one of many, but you're still one. And your existence and your place and where you are in the world is just as valid as anyone else's. And your voice and your experience and your unique human perspective is just as powerful and just as extraordinary as anyone else's. And these billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars. Hundreds of billions of dollars. Hundreds of billions of dollars in the vain hope that you'll never realize it. Don't let them. Revolt. Rebel. Repent. And Mock, if you want to hear more about my spiritual views, bud, just start bringing it up earlier. I'll talk about it. It's the number one thing I talk about. Like, I like communism, I like politics, but you want me to really go to town? I know you're a regular, bud, so just pop in and bring it up. And more communist memes. I'll work on that, bud. Yeah, people need to understand the theory. Yeah, it's natural, so translate to memes. Well, I run across a lot of communist memes, Bumble. For you, I'll bring them in, okay, bud? All right, guys. I already did the spiel. Good luck. We're going to need it.